Shay Peg gazed out of the window of the rapidly moving train, idly watching as the countryside flashed past. His thoughts were directed to the upcoming school holidays and the phone call he had received from his stepmother 2 weeks earlier. Shay attended an exclusive boarding school where he had just finished his third year. He was expecting to spend his holidays at the large comfortable house to the west of London where he had grown up. However, the phone call from his stepmother had changed all that, and he was still not sure if he would like the change or not. He had at best an uneasy relationship with his stepmother, Mandy. She had married his father 3 years earlier and each had taken an instant dislike to the other. Shay probably resented this new woman in his father's life, especially as he had been strongly attached to his real mother, who had died of cancer when Shay was 12. He also found her quite cold, very materialistic and self-centered. Mandy was 20 years younger than Shay's father, and it seemed to Shay that he had married her partly out of loneliness but mainly for her obvious physical attractions. Martin Peg had made a considerable fortune in business and enjoyed spending a great deal on his new wife. He and Shay were never close as Martin was too busy making money to spend time with his son and more recently with his new trophy wife. Mandy for her part sensed Shay's hostility and secretly felt intimidated by the boy's obvious intelligence. 6 months previously Martin had suddenly died of a massive heart attack, leaving Shay and Mandy as an unlikely family unit. Mandy's dislike of her stepson had only deepened when she learned the contents of Martin's will. Although not a particularly good father, Martin Peg had felt a sense of duty to provide generously for his only child. He also realized that Mandy was essentially a gold digger and would likely fritter away his money. He provided Mandy with what most would consider a very generous allowance, which would continue unless she remarried. He set up a trust fund to provide for Shay's education and upkeep until he was 21, at which time he would inherit the bulk of Martin's estate. None of this sat well with Mandy, who had expected to inherit everything. Her extravagant lifestyle meant that, despite her allowance, she was frequently short of money. Shay had not seen his stepmother since his father's funeral, and so the call from Mandy had come as a surprise. "Shay, darling, it's Mandy here. How are you? I'm so looking forward to seeing you when your term ends." Shay was immediately suspicious as his stepmother never addressed him in such sugary tones. Mandy continued, "Now Shay darling, I have some news for you for the summer which I am sure you are going to like. I have just received an invitation from an old friend to accompany him on a trip to New York for the summer. He has some business there and would like me to help him with some of the paperwork. Now I know that you normally spend the summer at home, but this time it is simply impossible. This trip with Duncan has come at a perfect time as I have been so devastated by your father's death." Shay strongly doubted this and suspected that as usual Mandy was looking after herself, but he didn't say anything. Mandy gushed on, "Now Shay, it is quite impossible for you to stay here on your own, so fortunately I have made arrangements with an old friend for you to spend the summer with her and her partner just outside Oxford. They have a lovely place in the country and I am sure that you will love it." Shay spoke for the first time. "Mandy, I am turning 16 in 3 weeks and I will be quite capable of looking after myself at home." Mandy's voice lost its sweetness and became sharp. "Don't be ridiculous, Shay. I could not possibly leave you alone. There's no telling what a young man like you could get up to, and besides I would be failing in my duty as your guardian to leave you unattended." Shay realized that further argument would be pointless, and he also thought that perhaps any arrangement would be better than a summer spent in Mandy's company. "Right then, that's settled," said Mandy briskly. "I'll pick you up at the station on the last day of school and drive you over to Claire and Sonia's. Don't bother packing anything. I'll arrange for your trunk to be shipped home and I will bring you some clothes to start your holiday. I have arranged an account at a clothes shop in Oxford where Claire and Sonia will take you to get the rest of your summer stuff." Shay stirred from his thoughts and looked at his watch, which showed that he had a further 20 minutes before his train reached Oxford. He only had a small backpack with him which contained his laptop and a battered copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which had been left for him by his mother shortly before she died. Jessie Peg had been a lecturer in philosophy at a regional university, and she had passed on her love of literature and philosophy to Shay. "Shay, I'm not going to be around to watch you grow up, and I know that the next few years will be really hard for you. When things seem at their blackest, I hope that you may find some consolation in the words of Marcus Aurelius. He wrote them years ago, but their wisdom is timeless. Shay had frequently taken comfort in the book and had also eagerly read works from other Stoic philosophers and the existentialists. Although Shay was a serious student, he was popular with his classmates due to his friendly nature. He performed well at sports and was never the target of bullying. 5'8" and of relatively slender build, Shay was a ferocious competitor who never backed down, something potential bullies found to their cost when he was new to the school. Shay's quiet optimism, however, would have been destroyed had he been a party to the conversation that had taken place between Mandy and her friend Claire to set up his summer holiday. Although Mandy had referred to Claire as an old friend, Claire did not rate Mandy very highly. She found Mandy quite shallow, but also knew that she could be manipulative and quite spiteful when she did not get her own way. "Claire, darling, you simply must help me. I have the chance to go with an old friend to New York for the summer, which I just cannot turn down. The problem is Shay. Do say that you can take care of him for the summer, it would mean so much to me." Claire had been astonished by the request. "Mandy, that simply is not possible. We would not have a clue how to manage a 15-year-old boy. If it was a stepdaughter, that might be different, but not a boy. The three of us would be very uncomfortable." It was then that Mandy played her trump card. With a giggle, she explained to Claire about Shay and the changes he was going through and the steps she was taking to address them. Claire was astonished and sympathetic, but not completely won around, and so Mandy changed tack. "Claire, do tell me, how is the lovely Sonia? She must be coming up for tenure at the university by now?" "Well, I was just looking through some old pictures on my computer and guess what? I found some wonderful shots of Sonia about to go skinny dipping at that rather dodgy party we met at a couple of years ago. I've been meaning to send them on to you, but you know how it is. Perhaps I can do it before I leave for New York. Now about Shay. Oh, you'll take him, that's wonderful. Claire, I owe you one for this." "Okay then, I'll be in touch in a week with all the arrangements, bye for now." The train pulled into the station at Oxford and Shay headed for the exit. He did not see his stepmother immediately until he realized that she was unlikely to have moved from her car. He found her in her Ferrari GTC for Lusso in the parking lot. She made a superficial show of affection without bothering to remove her designer sunglasses. "Good to see you, Shay, but we must get moving as I have lots to do. I'm on the evening flight to New York and there are still lots of packing and such to attend to. Still, I really wanted to see you settled with Claire." During the drive, she gave Shay some information about his summer hosts. "You'll love Claire, one of my oldest friends, and so good of her to have you, so don't let me down, Shay. I expect you to be on your very best behavior. Claire is the P and Games mistress at Highcliffe, a very good private girls' school, so I don't doubt she will be able to rein you in if you step out of line. Don't cross her. Her friend Sonia is a lecturer in mathematics at one of the Oxford colleges, I forget which one. Now I've arranged for some pocket money for you that Claire will provide, and I told you about clothes. I've thrown a few things in a bag, but you will need more for the summer. Now I expect you to help around the house and make yourself agreeable." Mandy continued to drone on and Shay found himself tuning her out and just murmuring occasionally in response. They were now driving along country lanes and presently Mandy turned into a tree-lined driveway and Shay had his first look at the house where he would be spending the summer. It was a gracious two-storied white stoned cottage set in a spacious garden. As they pulled up, the front door opened and a tall athletic woman walked forward to meet them. Mandy jumped out of the car and rushed forwards to embrace her. "Claire, darling, so wonderful to see you. This is Shay. I just know that you two are going to get along famously. Shay, this is Miss Kenton." Shay and Claire exchanged polite greetings, but any longer pleasantries were interrupted by Mandy. "Well, we mustn't dawdle, must we? Shay, sweetie, I couldn't help notice that you are a little stinky from your train journey. Why don't you pop into the shower and freshen up? Leave your clothes in your bedroom and I will take care of them, and I'll leave your case there so you can change when you are all clean and fragrant." If Shay found this behavior surprising, he didn't comment and Mandy showed him his room for the summer while Claire busied herself making lunch in the kitchen. Shay's room was spacious with a fine view over the surrounding countryside. It was decorated in a feminine fashion which on reflection did not surprise him. Mandy handed him a bath robe and hustled him into the adjoining bathroom. Pass your clothes out, Shay, and I will get them cleaned for you for the new term. Now hurry, you don't want to keep Claire waiting. Mandy's scheme surfaces. Shay luxuriated in the hot shower, enjoying the feel of the foamy suds against his skin. Although his school was quite exclusive, it was modern in terms of permitting a variety of hairstyles. Shay had let his grow past his collar, and he now shampooed and washed it thoroughly. After he dried his hair, he put on the bathrobe and went back into the bedroom. Just then there was a tap at the door, and he opened it to find Claire smiling at him. "Oh good, you are all done. Shay, I've just got the lunch ready, so why don't you get dressed and come on down to the kitchen? Your stepmother had to rush off and Sonia is at a seminar in Oxford, so it will just be the two of us." When she left, Shay walked over to the overnight bag that Mandy had brought and placed on the bed. He opened it and stared at the contents in astonishment. The case contained 3 casual skirts, 2 summer dresses, some feminine tops, a pair of low-heeled sandals, a pair of pink tennis shoes, and a pair of 3-inch pumps. There was also a selection of lacy bras and panties in pretty colors and a full white slip with a frilly trim. There were no boys' clothes of any description. Shay sat on the bed with his head in his hands for a long time. "What has the bitch done to me?" he kept muttering. Eventually his thoughts were interrupted by a call from Claire to come on down for lunch. Realizing he could not remain in a bathrobe all summer, Shay picked through the clothing in the case and selected a denim skirt, a white t-shirt with girl power emblazoned on the front, and the pink tennis shoes. Checking his reflection in the mirror, he was surprised at how much like a young girl he looked. He slowly went down the stairs and into the kitchen. Claire's face lit up with pleasure. "Shayla dear, you look wonderful. Come and sit here and we can have a nice chat as we eat." Shay did his best to smile at his hostess, and as he sat he said, "Miss Kenton, we don't need to chat, we need to talk." Claire looked surprised, especially when Shay said, "Miss Kenton, I need to know exactly what has taken place between you and my stepmother and why there are only these girls' clothes for me to wear. Although I am a guest in your house, I think that I deserve an explanation." By now Claire was looking absolutely bewildered. "But Shayla, your stepmother explained all about you wanting to transition, to become a girl, and how we could help you over the summer." "She did what?" said Shay incredulously. "Miss Kenton, I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about." Claire gaped at him. "Are you saying that you are not transitioning and that you do not want to become a girl?" she asked. "That is exactly what I am saying," replied Shay. "I can only surmise that this has come entirely from my stepmother. Please, Miss Kenton, tell me exactly what she has told you." Claire took a deep breath and began. "Mandy said that during the Easter break she came home unexpectedly and found you wearing some of her clothes. She confronted you and you broke down and admitted that you had always wished that you were a girl. She said that after a long talk she agreed to help you." She paused for a moment and Shay said, "Miss Kenton, this is a complete fabrication. I did not go home at Easter. If you contact my school, they will tell you that I spent the Easter break at school with about 20 other students." Claire slumped into a chair, unable to process what she had heard. As the truth of how she had been duped dawned on her, she became angry. That unspeakable bitch. Oh my God, how could I have been so blind? She stared wildly at Shay, and then to his embarrassment she broke down into an uncontrollable fit of sobbing. Shay moved over and put his arm around her. "It's not your fault, Miss Kenton. I know how manipulative and how plausible she can be. Sometimes I think she even believes her own lies." Still sniffing, Claire said, "Shay, what are we going to do? She will have left the country by this evening, and I'm certain she won't take any calls from me or you." "Can I just stay with you as Shay for the summer?" asked Shay hopefully. "Shay, it may not be that simple," said Claire miserably. "You see, she has told your school that you will not be returning in the next term, and she has enrolled you at Highcliffe, the girls' school where I teach. It may not be easy to undo all that." She thought for a moment and then said, "Do you have the name of the solicitor that your father used when he drew up his will?" When Shay nodded, she went on, "I think that we should call them and find out exactly what provisions your father made for your schooling." Shay found the number on his computer and called the office and gave his name and asked to speak to Mr. Prescott. When the solicitor came on the line, Shay introduced himself and outlined his problem and asked Mr. Prescott for a legal opinion on the provisions of the will. Mr. Prescott promised to review the document carefully and call back with his opinion. Claire looked at Shay and said, "Look, Shay, I am really sorry for what has happened and the unwitting role I have played in this." Shay replied, "It's not your fault, Miss Kenton. Don't worry, I am sure that we will find a solution." "That's very sweet of you, my dear. Look, I want you to call me Claire while you are staying here." She thought for a moment before continuing. "Shay, I want you to know that you are not alone in this. Sonia and I are also victims of your stepmother, but of course in a less serious way." She then proceeded to tell Shay about the incriminating photographs that Mandy had of Sonia posing while naked and drunk. "If that bitch did make these public, it would probably completely wreck Sonia's hopes of getting tenure at Oxford," said Claire bitterly. Shay was silent for a while, thinking over what Claire had told him. "There may be a solution, Claire, if you trust me." "I do trust you, Shay. I believe that you are a thoroughly decent young man." Shay laughed. "I don't look much like a young man dressed like this, but thank you anyway." "Do you have any photos of Sonia in a bathing suit?" he asked. Claire looked puzzled but replied, "Well, yes, I am sure that I do." "Send them to me electronically," said Shay. "What on earth are you going to do with them?" asked Claire. "I am going to hack into the evil stepmother's computer and replace the naughty ones with the very innocent pictures you are sending me." Claire looked appalled. She said, "But Shay, that's illegal. What would happen if you were caught?" "I won't be caught," said Shay confidently. "And besides, what she is doing is illegal. She is blackmailing you, and goodness knows what she is doing to me. I promise I will not leave a trace." Claire was still apprehensive, but her urge to be out of Mandy's clutches overcame her reluctance. "Do you know her password?" asked Claire. "No, but I am sure that I can get it," said Shay. "Stepmother is very unimaginative, so I don't think I will have trouble guessing her password." Shay opened his email and saved the 2 pictures of Sonia in a modest one-piece bathing suit that Claire sent him. He then bent over the keyboard for several minutes in silence. Eventually he announced, "I am in." A few minutes later he called Claire over to his laptop and pointed to a file marked Sophia very useful. He opened the file and brought up 2 pictures of a young and beautiful woman, completely naked and grinning inanely at the camera. "Are these the pictures?" he asked. "Yes," whispered Claire. Shay pressed delete and the pictures vanished. "All gone," announced Shay with a smile. He quickly transferred the pictures of Sonia in a bathing suit into the file and showed Claire. "Knowing my stupid stepmother, she would probably just send the file to whoever she wanted to without looking. I can imagine how puzzled they would be to receive these," he said with a laugh. Claire stared at the screen in disbelief for a few moments before bursting into tears of joy and throwing her arms around Shay and hugging him with all her considerable strength. Claire was still hugging Shay when they heard someone say, "Oh, please ladies, don't let me interrupt you. I have obviously come in an inopportune moment, or perhaps, Claire, it is a most opportune moment." Claire and Shay hurriedly broke their embrace and twisted around to see a beautiful slender woman surveying them with an ironical smile on her face. Claire burst into laughter, much to the surprise of Shay and the newcomer. When Claire recovered, she managed to say between giggles, "Shay, this is Sonia, and Sonia, this is Shay, our summer guest." Sonia stepped forward and greeted Shay affectionately. "She doesn't look like a Shay," she said with a twinkle in her eye. Claire said, "Sonia, my darling, I think we need a drink, and yes, that includes you, Shay," and she hurried over to the kitchen and returned with 3 gin and tonics. "I know we should not encourage a minor to drink," she said, handing one to Shay. "But under the circumstances, I think it is justified." They sat in the lounge and Claire proceeded to bring Sonia up to date with the latest developments. Sonia listened as though transfixed, and when Claire reached the part about Shay deleting the compromising pictures, she gave a squeal of delight and rushed over and hugged Shay almost as violently as her partner had a few minutes before. When they finished their drinks, Shay asked to be excused and went to the bathroom. After he had finished, he spent a few minutes checking himself in the mirror and adjusting his hair to better fit with the image of a young girl he was seeing in the mirror. When he returned to the lounge, Sonia said, "Shay, darling, Claire and I feel awful about the dirty trick your stepmother has played on you. You don't have to spend the summer with us dressed as a girl just to satisfy a couple of old lesbians like us. We will go into town and get you some boy clothes tomorrow." That's very nice of you, Sonia, but honestly I would rather spend the summer with you as a girl than spend one day with my stepmother. I think that we need to wait until I hear back from the solicitor before we make any further plans. They talked for a while before Shay rose and began to gather up the glasses and take them through to the kitchen. Sonia and Claire did not notice at first, but when they heard him moving around in the kitchen they went to investigate. To their surprise they found Shay washing the lunch dishes. "Shay, you are our guest, you do not have to do that," said Claire. "A girl has to make herself useful," said Shay with a grin as he finished the last dish. The wool Claire was prevented from answering by the sudden ringing of Shay's cell phone. He answered the call, which was from Mr. Prescott. Anxiously Claire and Sonia waited as Shay engaged in a lengthy conversation with the solicitor. By the expression on Shay's face they guessed that the news was not good. Eventually Shay ended the call and turned to his two hostesses. "Well, this is not what I expected," began Shay. Claire and Sonia insisted that he sit with them in the lounge before giving them the latest news. "It seems that my beloved stepmother did her homework thoroughly," he said with heavy irony. "What did he say?" asked Claire and Sonia anxiously. "Well," began Shay, "my father wanted to make sure that I had a good education, but also that it was contingent on me continuing in school. In his will he stipulated that Mandy as my guardian was to ensure that I attended a private school of good quality. It had to be in the top 20 academic schools in the country as listed by an independent grading company. The same applied to university, which was guaranteed until I had graduated with whatever degree I chose. If I dropped out of school for any reason, the money would stop and be transferred to Mandy's allowance. Unfortunately, he did not stipulate which school I attend, only that it be in the top 20. As you may know, Highcliffe is ranked number 11 in the country, and it is to Highcliffe that my stepmother has enrolled me, having convinced the headmistress and governors that I am transitioning to be a girl. If I do not attend for any reason, I lose all my education benefits and any chance of a good education. Since I am determined to follow in my real mother's footsteps as an academic, it appears that I have no choice but to attend Highcliffe, ostensibly as a girl." He paused for breath and Claire broke in angrily, "This is monstrous. There must be something we can do to overturn this." "According to Mr. Prescott, there is nothing we can do to change the will as stated. Either I attend Highcliffe as a girl or I lose my education," said Shay gloomily. "Darling, we don't have to decide anything right now," said Sonia soothingly. "Let's sleep on it and decide in the morning." "Good idea, Sonia," said Claire. "Look, I think that we need to get out of the house for a while and take a walk and then go out for a meal. How does that sound, Shay?" "I'm willing to go out dressed as a girl as long as I look like one," said Shay. "So could you please help me look presentable?" "Of course, my dear," said Sonia. "Come with me." Sonia took Shay through to the ensuite bathroom attached to the main bedroom she shared with Claire. She sat Shay down on a stool in front of a large mirror and proceeded to apply makeup to his eyes and face deftly. She carefully plucked and trimmed his eyebrows before turning her attention to his hair, which she arranged in a feminine style. When she was finished 30 minutes later, Shay was astonished at the transformation. He really felt that he looked like a teenage girl. Sonia found Shay a light gray hoodie which went well with his denim skirt and t-shirt, and then accompanied him back into the lounge to show Claire. "Shay, or perhaps for tonight I should say Shayla, you look wonderful. No one would know that you are not a natural girl. Let's head off and enjoy the beautiful countryside." They drove for 15 minutes and parked near public footpaths that lead into the surrounding farmland. Claire had chosen a circuit that took them a little more than an hour to complete, and when they were back at the car they all felt refreshed from their walk. By the time they reached the outskirts of Oxford they all felt ready for dinner. Claire had made a reservation at a small Italian restaurant that was a favorite of hers and Sonia's. She ordered a bottle of Chianti and they settled down to study the menu. After they had ordered they began to talk. Shay insisted that they not discuss his summer options but instead get to know each other better. He listened attentively as Claire described her teaching position at Highcliffe and was impressed at how passionate she was about her job, especially her desire to see teenage girls become more vigorous and physically active. "Too many of my students think that physical activity is unfeminine and that it will discourage boys from being attracted to them," she said. "The boys who would be turned off by that are the very ones that they should avoid," observed Shay. Claire felt a surge of pleasure at this remark, but she said, "You try telling them that." Shay smiled and said, "Maybe I will, before the summer is out, maybe I will." When it was Shay's turn, he told Claire and Sonia about his early life and his love for his mother and the devastation he felt when she died. Their hearts went out to him when they thought of the terrible traumas he had experienced in his young life and how well he seemed to be taking this latest setback. "Shay, we will stand by you, whatever decision you make," said Sonia. Shay smiled and just said, "Thank you." After they finished eating, Claire called for the bill and they drove slowly home. Shay suddenly felt very tired and asked to be allowed to retire for the night. "I'm afraid we don't have any pajamas for you," said Claire apologetically. "Do you terribly mind wearing a nightdress?" "A nightdress will be fine," said Shay, pausing only to give a brief hug and kiss to his hostesses. "And thank you both so very much for taking me in over the summer. I know it is not easy for you and I will do my best to be as easy and agreeable as possible." "Shay, we will love having you," said Claire and Sonia together. As Shay left the room to go upstairs, Sonia went after him. "Shay, I will help you take off your makeup," she said. She brought him a silky nightdress and assisted him in cleaning his face of makeup. Lastly, she placed a soft kiss on his cheek and left him alone. Shay took off his new clothes, put on the nightdress, and minutes after getting into bed he was deeply asleep. Downstairs, Claire and Sonia continued to talk about their guest for a long time. "What a remarkable young person we have with us," said Sonia. "I think we are going to have a very interesting summer." Shayla makes her appearance. Shay slept until after 9 the next morning. He woke with a start, and when he realized the time, he put on a dressing gown over his nightdress and hurried downstairs. "Good morning, Shay dear," greeted Claire. "Did you sleep well?" "Really well, thank you," said Shay, sitting down to the breakfast that Claire had prepared for the three of them. Just then Sonia entered and gave Shay a quick hug. They lingered over breakfast, and as Claire rose to clear away the plates, Shay said, "Claire and Sonia, I think my sleep helped me to make a decision about my summer which I hope that you will support." Claire and Sonia turned expectantly towards him, and Shay continued, "Last night I dreamed of my mother, and in the dream she was urging me to be the best person I could possibly be. When I woke up, this dream was still very fresh in my mind, and I realized what I have to do. I have decided that if you are willing, I want to enroll at Highcliffe next term and not give my stepmother the satisfaction of appropriating my education money." "I'm calling her bluff." Claire and Sonia stared at Shay in amazement. "Shay, are you really sure about this?" asked Claire anxiously. "Shay, you don't have to make a decision now. We have the whole summer," said Sonia. "Yes, I'm sure," replied Shay. "The longer I leave it, the harder it will be. If I am going to attend Highcliffe, the more practice I get being a girl, the better." "Sonia, and I feel so wretched for you," said Claire. "No boy should ever be put in this position." Shay laughed and said, "Surely being a girl cannot be all bad. After all, both of you are girls, and you seem to have survived very well." "But we weren't boys first," said Sonia. "Well, not many boys get the chance to experience life as a girl," said Shay. "I intend to make the most of it." Sonia shook her head and said, "I am just amazed that you can be so philosophical about this." "I get that from my mother," said Shay. "She not only taught philosophy, but she lived it. Before she died, she gave me a copy of one of the great works of philosophy, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. He and others like Viktor Frankl, hundreds of years later, believed that whatever situation a person found themselves in, they still had the freedom to choose how they reacted to it. I have read quite a lot of those works, and they have helped me through many difficult times." "Shay, Sonia, and I will help you all we can," said Claire. "Where would you like to start?" "Perhaps you could start by calling me Shayla, which seems to be the name my stepmother has registered me as at Highcliffe. Also, you had better start referring to me as she and her," said Shay. "After that, you could help me choose something appropriate for a 16-year-old girl to wear from what stepmother has left me." "I'll come with you now and see what would work best for today," said Sonia, "and I will also give you your first makeup lesson." "Your stepmother has kindly set up an account for you at Marks and Spencer's in Oxford," said Claire sarcastically. "Typical of Mandy to choose one of the cheapest places she could, but we will do our best to find you clothes that will help you to fit in. Also, I checked and the account stipulates that it is only valid for women's clothing, so we won't be able to buy you some boy clothes in case this doesn't work. Well, we'll just have to make sure that it does work, said Shay. I'll call my hairdresser, said Sonia. You will need a different cut before you can look the part you will be playing. I've just had a thought, said Claire suddenly. I can't imagine that the governors would have accepted Shayla without some sort of medical certificate to say that she is on a transitioning program. I know. I'll call Elsie at the school. She deals with all new applications, so I am sure that she will know. Sonia, why don't you help Shayla and I will call her now? Sonia looked through the overnight bag Mandy had provided and selected a pale blue cotton dress with an A-line skirt that reached just above Shay's knees. This looks young enough for a girl your age, but it also gives you reasonable coverage, said Sonia. Now I know that you do not have anything up front, but you should wear a bra. It would only attract the wrong sort of attention if you didn't. Once Shay was dressed, Sonia showed him how to apply makeup and helped arrange his hair in a somewhat feminine style. That will have to do for now, Shayla, until we can get you into my hairdresser's. Shay stepped into a pair of strappy sandals and they went downstairs to join Claire. Claire looked up as they entered. You are not going to believe this, she said. Elsie said that she was going to call me today. Apparently Mandy told them that she had arranged for me to drop off the medical certificate sometime this week. What are we going to do? Said Sonia incredulously. Claire thought for a moment and then said, the way I see it is this: without a certificate Shayla cannot attend Highcliffe. I think that was her backup plan, said Shay. If I agreed to go to school as Shayla, I wouldn't be able to provide the proper documentation, so I would still lose my schooling. He turned to face them and said, I won't let her beat me. Can you help me? I have a friend who is a doctor, said Claire. I think we need to talk to her. Claire picked up the phone again and dialed a number. When it was answered, she gave the receptionist her name and asked for Dr. Welland to call her back when she had a chance. That's all we can do for now, said Claire. I think that we should follow our original plan and take Shayla out for shopping and grooming. Sonia had called ahead and arranged a hair appointment for early afternoon, so they had the morning clear for shopping. They left the car in a parking garage and walked into the city center. You'll need underwear, Shayla, so let's start there, said Sonia. I think you would be best with some high-cut panties that can give you firm support, if you know what I mean, said Sonia, feeling slightly embarrassed. They found some that looked suitable and put a dozen in their basket. Next, Sonia and Claire grabbed a selection of bras of different styles together with some inserts and guided Shay to a changing room. They spent 15 minutes trying different sizes and styles until at last Claire and Sonia were satisfied. They added 6 bras of different colors to the basket. I know girls rarely wear slips now, said Sonia, but in your case it would be a good idea as it will give you a little more covering. She put 2 full and 3 half slips into the basket, which was starting to get full. When they selected 3 nightgowns, they needed an extra basket. Shayla, said Sonia, I think that you are going to have to accept that you are going to be a different type of girl. I think that is fairly evident, said Shay with a grin. Oh right, said Sonia. Well, I didn't really mean it in that way. What I meant was, while most teenage girls will wear tight jeans and shorts a lot, you won't be able to because... Here she paused in embarrassment until Shay finished the sentence for her. Because of the different architecture in my groin, he said. That's what you mean, isn't it, Sonia? Well, yes, that is what I was trying to say, said Sonia. So what you are suggesting is that I need to be more of a girly girl and dress mostly in skirts and dresses for the sake of my modesty, said Shay. I'm afraid Sonia is right, Shayla. Your immediate future will be in skirts and dresses, said Claire. She went on to say, there are 2 other reasons why this is necessary. One is that it will be easier to move and act like a girl if you are wearing dresses, and 2, you will need to wear a skirt for school as it is part of the school uniform, so the more practice you get the better. I fully understand, said Shay. And so in that case, let's go and find the nicest skirts and dresses we can. After all, my wretched stepmother is paying. So for the next hour, Shay tried on a huge selection of dresses and skirts, and Sonia and Claire narrowed the choice down to those that were full enough to avoid unseemly bulges and attractive enough to be acceptable for a teenage girl. They ended up with 6 skirts and 5 dresses and were about to take their selections up to the cashier when Sonia paused before a longer dark blue evening gown. Shayla, she said, this is just an idea and you don't have to say yes, but Claire and I have tickets for the theater, it's Hamlet, in Oxford on next Saturday night and we would love to take you if you would like to come. The thing is, you see, we occasionally like to get all dressed up in elegant gowns, like fine ladies out for the night, and if you did come you would need a dress like this. But, she said hastily, we completely understand if you would rather not. Shay looked at Sonia and said with mock seriousness, so if I agree to come I would need to be a fine lady as well? Well, yes, I suppose so, said Sonia awkwardly. Well, in that case we had better buy the dress, said Shay with a smile. Oh Shayla, you are just the most wonderful person imaginable, said Sonia, giving Shay a huge hug. Fortunately the dress was a perfect fit, and after buying some matching shoes together with more shoes for the other outfits they made their way back to the car to load their large bags into the boot. Time for lunch, said Claire. Shopping always makes me hungry and we have done a lot of it. They lunched at a small restaurant on a side street, and after they finished there was still half an hour before Shay's hair appointment, so they browsed around some of the shops. They stopped in at a second-hand bookstore where Shay was pleased to find a copy of Hamlet which he felt would be good to read before and after seeing the production. When they entered the hairdresser's, Sonia was greeted warmly by Anna, the owner. Sonia introduced Shay as a young cousin staying for the summer. Anna escorted Shay to a chair and handed him a book of styles and cuts. Have a look and see if there is something there you like, Shayla, and we will create it for you. Your hair isn't very long, so we will be restricted to the styles that go to your shoulders. Sonia decided to stay with Shay while Claire went out to do some shopping on her own. Shay and Sonia looked carefully through the book and eventually settled on one they liked. It was a layered bob with bangs which met with approval from Anna. Shayla, that will suit you really well, she enthused. Now just sit back and enjoy yourself, you are going to love the result. Sonia suggested that Shay should also have a pedicure and manicure at the same time as the hairstyling. She stayed for a while and when satisfied that Shay was comfortable in the salon left to join Claire. Anna says that you will be at least another 2 hours, Shayla, so we will come back to collect you then. Sonia met Claire at a cafe where they sipped their café lattes and discussed their summer guest. I am worried about Shay, said Claire, he seems to be accepting all this too easily. Do you think that he might really have gender dysphoria? Sonia thought for a while. I'm not sure, she said, but I'm inclined to think not. He is unusually mature and self-possessed for almost 16. You know, I think that he is doing all this for a reason, and I suspect that this will reveal itself over the next few months. I hope you are right, said Claire. I never thought it would happen that I would come to care so much about a teenage boy. How are we going to handle the doctor's appointment? Asked Sonia. If your friend feels that Shay is being forced against his will to transition, she will feel bound to report it. I think that we need to have this discussion with Shay when we collect him, said Claire. Back at the salon, Shay found the hairstyling process so relaxing that he found himself drifting off to sleep. When he awoke, Anna was just finishing. Before looking in the mirror, he glanced down at his hands and saw the freshly painted pink nails. Strangely, this seemed to affect him more than all the other changes. I've really crossed a divide into a feminine world, he thought. Let's hope I can survive. Anna was about to show Shay his new look when Claire and Sonia returned. Oh good, you are just in time for the unveiling, cried Anna. She removed the light scarf covering Shay's hair and spun him round to face the mirror. There was a collective gasp from Shay, Claire and Sonia. Shayla, you look absolutely gorgeous, from Claire and Sonia, and, oh my god, I'm a girl, from Shay. Well yes, she turned out rather well, said Anna modestly. Anna, you are a true artist, said Sonia in wonder. Nonsense, I had great material to work with, replied Anna. Shay was momentarily speechless. After Claire had paid, they ushered the still stunned Shay out of the salon. We have to keep moving, said Claire. Your doctor's appointment is in 45 minutes and we have a few things we need to discuss before you meet Dr. Finch. She explained about the concerns that she and Sonia had discussed earlier. Shay listened carefully until Claire had finished before replying. I can understand your concern, he said. I am sure that I am very unusual in this because all the boys I know would freak out at having to present as a girl. Maybe it is my mother's influence and the books she encouraged me to read, but I don't find this as strange and traumatic as you think. After all, I was nearly a girl." "What on earth do you mean?" asked Claire. Shay smiled and said, "Well, it's only one little chromosome, isn't it? A Y instead of another X. All three of us have X's, you just have more. If I had been born a girl, I wouldn't be any less of a person, would I?" "No, of course not," said Claire hastily. "My mother used to say that you often got more out of life if you said yes instead of no. She didn't of course mean harmful things, but when opportunities present themselves, they can take you in directions you might never have gone. I have the opportunity to be a girl for perhaps a year, and if I didn't take it, I might always live with that regret." He looked hard at Claire and Sonia before continuing. "I have only known the pair of you for a couple of days, but I feel warmth and love from both of you that I have not felt since my mother died. I know that you will both look after me, and I feel happy to be with you." Claire and Sonia were unable to speak for a few minutes, but all three embraced each other powerfully and cried in each other's arms. "Shayla, that is one of the most beautiful things I have ever heard," said Claire when she had recovered some of her composure. "I can't respond now, and even if I could, we all need to repair our faces and get to the doctors." They only had a short wait at the medical center before the receptionist showed Shay and Sonia into a treatment room. She explained that Dr. Finch would like to talk to Claire first before meeting Shay. 20 minutes later, Claire came into the treatment room accompanied by Dr. Finch. Dr. Finch was slightly plump with iron gray hair and a pleasant, reassuring manner. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Shayla," she said. "Claire has been explaining to me a few things about your situation, but I would really like to hear it all from you." "Where would you like to start, doctor?" asked Shay politely. "Well, I understand that you want to live and attend school as a girl, at least for the next year. Is that correct?" "Yes, doctor, that about sums it up," replied Shay. "How long have you had this desire?" asked Dr. Finch. "Well, it is really quite recent," said Shay. Sonia and Claire smiled at this understatement. "And how long have you been presenting as a girl?" 2 days, answered Shay. "That is not very long to be making such an important decision," replied the doctor. "Yes, I realize that," said Shay, "but I am sure that I want to do this." "What makes you so sure?" persisted Dr. Finch. "My mother died almost 4 years ago, and since then I have lacked any real parenting. My stepmother hates me and my father was distant, but he too died less than a year ago. Sonia and Claire have given me more love in 2 days than I have had in 4 years, and I want to stay with them. I want to live with them as a girl and go to a girls' school where Claire teaches." Claire and Sonia had to fight very hard not to start crying again. "Shayla, I am very sorry for the terrible losses you have suffered, and I would like to help you, but I must think this over for a bit. Claire, could you please come back to my office? I need your help to think this through." They left the room and Sonia and Shay held hands while they waited. 15 minutes later, Finch and Claire returned. "Well, Shayla, I have given this a lot of thought with Claire's help. Here is what I propose. I am willing to help you be a girl for the next year as you explore whether this is something that you want to do on a more permanent basis. Normally I would want more time, but I am very impressed by your sincerity and maturity, and of course the fact that you will be with Claire and Sonia makes a big difference. I am going to prescribe you some hormone suppressant drugs which will just delay puberty. Your voice will not deepen and you will not develop facial hair or other male characteristics. If you decide to live as a boy again, the effects are completely reversible. Is that okay with you?" "Yes, Dr. Finch, thank you so much," said Shay with real pleasure. "Right, let's examine you then," said Dr. Finch briskly. Once the examination was complete, Shay left the clinic with a prescription which they filled at a nearby chemist shop. Shay turned to Claire and Sonia and said, "I can't thank you enough for what you have done for me." "Just stop right there, young lady," said Claire firmly. "I for one don't want to start blubbing again. Let's head home for one of Sonia's wonderful dinners at which you can model one of your new dresses." "Certainly, Miss Kenton," said Shay with a grin, giving a little curtsy. "Enough of that, missy," replied Claire as Sonia gave a little chuckle. While Sonia prepared dinner, Shay went up to his room and unpacked all the clothes from the shopping trip and put them in drawers and the wardrobe. He looked carefully at the dresses they had bought and finally selected a simple yellow off-the-shoulder dress with a full skirt. After putting on one of the new full slips, he stepped into the dress and slowly zipped it up. As the dress closed around his body, Shay was suddenly engulfed in a glorious erotic sensation and an instant and powerful erection. He hurried into the bathroom and grabbed some tissues which he inserted into his panties. It only took a few gentle strokes and he felt his knees buckle and he gave a cry as he erupted into a shattering climax. He waited a few moments to regain his composure before heading downstairs. "Shayla, are you okay?" called Sonia from the kitchen. "I thought I heard you call out." "Oh, I just stubbed my toe," Shay stammered. He entered the kitchen and Claire and Sonia gushed their approval. "Shayla, that looks wonderful. I am so glad that we bought it," said Sonia excitedly. Sonia had made a shrimp risotto and a green salad and Claire had lit some candles to add to the mood. "We want to celebrate this very special day with you, Shayla. Welcome to our world," said Claire as they sat down. "Thank you," replied Shay. "I really do feel welcome." Over dinner they began to discuss the summer months before the return to school. "We don't think that you will want to spend the holidays just here with us," began Claire. "It would be good if you could spend some time with other teenagers, but we were wondering." She paused awkwardly before blurting out, "It's just that we wonder whether you would rather be with girls or boys." Shay laughed. "Don't be afraid to ask, Claire. What you really mean is whether I am straight or gay." Claire became very flustered. "Oh, help me, Sonia," she said. Sonia began, "Not that it's any of our business," before Shay cut her off. "Well, now you come to mention it, I suppose that I am not straight," began Shay, and as Claire and Sonia gasped in surprise he hurried on, "I have to confess that for the last 2 days I have become a committed lesbian and show every sign of remaining one for the next year." "Oh, you little tease," cried Sonia, "you really had us going for a moment. Lesbian indeed." "When in Rome," said Shay, and all three burst into hysterical laughter. When they recovered, Claire said, "In that case I think it would be a very good idea if you could meet some of the girls who will be your classmates next term." "Let me give it some thought and we will arrange something." "Shayla, I have a favor to ask you," said Sonia. "I need to go into my college tomorrow to finalize some of my exam grading and generally bring the year to a close. I was wondering very much whether you could help me. You could do a lot of the sorting and filing, and I am sure that the two of us could get it done much more quickly. After I could show you around the university. Sonia, it would be my pleasure to help you and I would love to see some of Oxford's great sights." After helping clean up the dishes, Shay began to feel tired and excused himself in order to have an early night. Once in his room he quickly undressed, carefully removed his makeup and selecting one of his new night dresses climbed into bed. He tried reading for a while but became so sleepy that he abandoned the attempt and quickly drifted into a deep and satisfying sleep. By the time he came down in the morning, Sonia was waiting for him with breakfast. "Claire has gone for a run, so we won't wait for her. Finish your breakfast and then get dressed and we can go. I think one of your nice skirts and a t-shirt would be fine." It was only a 30-minute drive to Sonia's college, and as Sonia had a parking pass they were soon at work in her office. As Sonia had predicted, the work she had to finish went much more quickly with Shay's help, and after 3 hours they were done. They had lunch at a small restaurant near the college, and when they had finished Sonia took Shay for a tour of some of the highlights of Oxford. First they went to the Bodleian Library and slowly walked through the ancient building, just absorbing the atmosphere of over 400 years of academic learning. Shay gazed in wonder at a copy of the Magna Carta and later was transfixed at the sight of Shakespeare's First Folio. He asked Sonia if she would mind if they spent the rest of the afternoon in the library, and she readily agreed. Later, as they drove home, Shay felt that he had taken a very special trip through history and made a silent promise that one day he would return there as a student. "Claire has an idea." Claire was delighted that they had enjoyed such a successful day. She waited until Shay had finished his excited description of their afternoon before she asked for his attention. "Shayla, at your previous school, were you ever involved in their rowing program?" she asked. "Yes, I quite liked it," replied Shay, "but last year I found that I wasn't quite big enough to compete, so I concentrated more on rugby and tennis." "Why do you ask?" "I am the coach of our school program. We only have about 20 girls involved, but we have a 4-girl boat that is quite good. I think that they can make a name for themselves at our main regatta later in the year, which involves all the best girls' schools. Many of the girls in this competition go on to row at Oxford and Cambridge. Unfortunately, she said, I have just heard that one of the crew had a fall horse riding and has broken her arm. She will recover fully, of course, but she will be quite unable to do any of the summer training we had planned. I don't have another girl to put in the without disrupting the other crews. She hesitated a moment before saying, Shayla, I wonder if you would consider filling in for her while she recovers? Now, of course, because you are not born a girl, you would not be eligible to row in the regatta, but Jenny should be fine by then. It really would help the other girls stay in competition during the summer. What do you think? Gosh, I'm not sure if I would be good enough, said Shay. I'd hate to be a real weak link and frustrate the others. I suspect that you would be fine if you have rowed at your other school. I am familiar with the programs of all the schools, boys and girls, and I suspect that you have been well taught. Would you please give it a try? I'd love to try, said Shay, but what would the other girls in the crew think? They are bound to know that I'm really a boy. Oh, I'm sure that they would be delighted to have you. It will mean that they can do proper water training. Also, the three of them will be in your class at school, so that would give you some much-needed companionship throughout the summer, said Claire. When would you like me to start? Asked Shay. I've scheduled our first training session for Monday morning, but I suggest that you and I go down to the river and take out a shell tomorrow, to help you get your rhythm back. That sounds great, said Shay enthusiastically. In that case, Missy, you will need an early night, so after dinner I suggest that you turn in. By 9:30 Shay found himself in bed and was quickly asleep. He did not stir until he felt Claire gently shaking him awake in the morning. They had a light breakfast and then Claire found Shay some of her athletic wear. They might be a bit big, but they will do for now, and we can get you your own kit later. Highcliffe had an agreement with the university to use their facilities on the Upper Thames, and it took about 40 minutes to drive there. Claire unlocked one of the boat sheds and went over to a rack where the racing shells were stored. She took one end of a slim craft, and with Shay at the other end they carried it out to one of the jetties. She then selected an oar for each of them and held the boat steady while Shay climbed in. After climbing in herself, she gently pushed off and allowed them to drift out towards the broad expanse of river. Okay Shayla, let's start with some slow, easy strokes to let you find your rhythm. Although out of practice, Shay quickly found himself settling into the familiar sweep and with some encouragement from Claire began to relax and enjoy himself. After a few minutes, Claire suggested that they try to increase their rate but to still stay relaxed. You have been well taught, Shayla. I think you will be a very good fit with the other girls. Shay smiled at the thought of him being thought of as one of the girls. They stayed out for about an hour, at which time they were able to row at a very respectable pace. Finally, Claire called for a halt and they slowly paddled back to the boathouse and stored the shell and oars. Shayla, I am delighted, said Claire as they drove home. I can't wait to see you with the rest of the crew on Monday. Later that afternoon they returned to Oxford and Marks and Spencer's and bought a selection of loose jogging pants, leggings, short and long sleeve t-shirts and a windproof jacket. Now Shayla, said Claire with mock seriousness, remember what Sonia and I said, these pants are only to be worn when rowing or training, not around the house. We expect to only see you in skirts like a respectable young lady. Shay pretended to sound dismayed. But Claire, I was hoping you'd allow me to wear dresses as well. Claire shook her head and said, Shayla, you are impossible. The next day was Saturday and Claire suggested that she and Shay train together in the morning, which would leave the afternoon open for getting ready for the play in the evening. First, Claire took him for a 5-mile cross-country run, and despite being reasonably fit, he struggled to keep up. Claire had set up a gym in the garage and they both did a routine of chin-ups and weight lifting, which left Shay with an enhanced respect for Claire and her fitness. I am going to learn so much from you while I am here, thank you, he said. Claire smiled and said, yes, you will learn a lot, but that it because you have really opened your mind to learning. Still, it won't be easy. You have only a few weeks to learn to be a girl. Your classmates have been working at it all their lives. An evening at the theater after lunch, Sonia took charge. Shayla, this afternoon you are going to be introduced to one of the pleasures of being a girl, the sensory pleasure of pampering yourself and preparing yourself to go out. I hope that you will enjoy the experience as much as we do. First Sonia ran Shay a hot bath laced with scent and inches deep in bubbles. "Take as long as you like to soak and enjoy yourself," she said. "When you are done you can shampoo your hair and I will help you to set it." Shay, who was tired from the strenuous workout, found the bath so relaxing that he dozed off and only awoke when the water began to cool. He then showered and washed his hair, luxuriating in the warm water cascading over his body. He wrapped himself in a large fluffy towel and called to Sonia that he was ready for her help. Sonia carefully styled and dried his hair and then taught him how to apply fresh nail polish to his fingers and toes. Then Shay sat in front of a mirror and with Sonia giving precise directions began to apply his makeup. "It's best if you do it, dear," said Sonia. "We have lots of time, so it does not matter if you make mistakes." Sonia proved to be a hard taskmaster, but at each fresh attempt Shay became a little more proficient until at last Sonia was satisfied. "I think that is perfect, Shayla," she said. "I suggest that you get your underwear on and then relax. I'll help you with your dress just before we go." First Shay used a pair of tight control panties to help control the bulge of his boy parts, before sliding a pair of lavender-colored silk French cut tap panties up his freshly shaved legs. He felt a guilty pleasure at the sensation as he did so. He selected a lacy matching bra and inserted some small gel inserts to create a little cleavage. He carefully rolled a pair of stay-up stockings up each leg, once more reveling in the wonderful sensation as he did so. Shay deliberately prolonged the process of dressing so he could get maximum enjoyment. "If I'm going to be a girl for a while I may as well enjoy it," he thought. Finally he called Sonia in and asked her to help him on with his full satin slip. "I could do it myself, but it feels so much more exciting if you do it," he said. "Does this mean that I am really turning into a girl?" "Do you want to?" asked Sonia with a smile. "I'm not sure," replied Shay honestly, "but I never thought that I would enjoy this so much. I hope this does not make me weird." "No, darling, it just makes you human," said Sonia softly as she lowered the soft sensuous garment over Shay's raised arms and smoothed it down his body. "How does that feel?" she asked. "Out of this world," replied Shay dreamily. "Okay, darling, I suggest that you relax with a book while Claire and I get ready, and then I will put you into your dress." For the next hour Shay toyed with his book, but really his thoughts were on the radical changes that had occurred in his life during the last week. Reluctantly he had to admit that in many ways the changes were very pleasurable. Finally Sonia sashayed into the room wearing an elegant ball gown which swept to the ground. Her hair was piled up onto her head and she looked wonderful. "Sonia, you look amazing," gasped Shay in admiration. "Thank you, kind sir," said Sonia and then giggled. "No, that can't be right. Thank you, Miss Shayla, you are too kind." She picked up Shay's dress and said, "Okay, sweetie, time to get you into your dress." She faced Shay and held the back of the dress open for him. "Lift your slip up, darling, and step in." Shay did so, trembling slightly, and as Sonia slowly drew the zip up his back Shay felt a strong shiver run down his spine. Once she had the dress fully zipped, Sonia produced a needle and thread of the same color and added a few stitches at the top to complete the fastening. "Just a precaution, darling, we don't want anything to come undone during the evening." She placed her lips next to Shay's ear and whispered, "Now you really are committed, Shayla darling, you won't be getting out of this dress by yourself, perhaps we should keep you like this all sweet and swishy." Shay calmly replied, "Of course I will always follow your wishes, Sonia." "To Shay," she replied with a grin. She steered Shay over to the full-length mirror and he gasped when he saw his reflection. Looking back at him was a very pretty young woman in a long gown, with a softly pleated skirt that reached his ankles. The gown was sleeveless with wide shoulder straps so that his padded bra was fully covered. Sonia helped him to step into an elegant pair of pumps with a 3-inch heel and then suggested that he walk around the room. "Let yourself glide, Shayla, let your gown talk to you, feel it swirl around your legs. This is the most wonderful sensation, you are so feminine, now enjoy it," she said. Shay began to feel the most wonderful sensation as he promenaded around the room, and he was only brought back to reality by the sound of clapping. When he looked up he saw Claire beaming her approval. "Shayla, you look sublime, you are a natural," she said. "Hold still now, I have to just make the finishing touches." Claire briefly left the room and returned with a small package which she handed to Shay. "While you were in the salon, Sonia, and I got you a couple of small gifts." Shay opened the package and drew out a necklace with a Celtic design etched in silver and a pair of dangly hooped earrings. He blushed with pleasure and stammered his thanks. "Let's get them on you," said Claire. "Don't worry, I know you don't have pierced ears yet," she added with emphasis which Shay could not help catch. "These have a spring attachment which look just like the real thing." She attached the necklace and then the earrings and stepped back to study the effect. "Perfect," said Claire. "You look the perfect young lady about to go out on the town." She then handed Shay a small bag with a long slender strap that hooked over his shoulder and a fine wool shawl before ushering him out of the room and down to the car. The drive into Oxford only took 30 minutes and they were able to park at Sonia's college, which was a short walk from the theater. Shay was particularly careful walking in his heels on an uneven pavement, but his natural sense of balance ensured that he arrived at the theater unscathed. "My goodness, you do make a beautiful girl," said Sonia with admiration. "Much too pretty to be a boy. I'd love to keep you like this." "Oh, I heartily agree," said Claire, but noticing Shay's alarm quickly added, "but that will be Shayla's decision." Shaw could not help notice the admiring glances he got from many of the men they passed as they made their way through the theater. Many people were dressed formally, but Shay, Sonia and Claire really stood out. Shay felt confused with his emotions. On one hand, he was mortified to be attracting the attention of men, but on the other hand he felt a strange pride that he was considered attractive. Their seats were in the middle of the dress circle, and as he sat down Shay was conscious of the delightful rustle of his satin dress which he carefully smoothed under himself. The performance was spectacular. The play was done in late Victorian style with military uniforms for the men and long dresses with layers of crisp petticoats for the women. Hamlet was played by a young actor who gave the part an energy and zest that made the production sparkle. Shay found himself totally absorbed and was surprised when the curtains fell for the interval. "Come on, Shayla, we want to initiate you in another of the charms of being female, the queue for the toilets," said Sonia. As Claire had predicted, into the queue was long, and Shay was surprised to feel an indignation at the way the men quickly streamed into their toilet while the women's line inched along. When he mentioned this, Claire and Sonia burst out laughing. "Shayla, you have only been a girl for a week and already you are railing against men. I see a very bright future for you as a feminist," said Claire. They managed to complete their necessities just as a bell sounded to announce the restart of the play. Shay found the second half just as compelling as the first, and when the actors took their bows they were rewarded with a standing ovation which lasted a few minutes. They left the theater slowly, Shay again conscious of the gentle rustle of his long dress. Claire and Sonia had made reservations at a small restaurant which was a popular spot for theater patrons. The service was very efficient and they were soon enjoying a delicious meal. Claire and Sonia were excitedly discussing the play and did not at first notice how quiet Shay was. "You are very quiet, Shayla darling. Is everything okay? Did you enjoy the production?" asked Claire anxiously. "Oh, I loved it," replied Shay. "I have never seen anything as good." He hesitated a moment and then said, "Sorry to be so silent, but I'm a little confused, that's all." "Do tell us," said Sonia, "perhaps we can help." "It was Polonius's speech. You know, the one where he is giving advice to his son. He says this above all, 'To thine own self be true.' It had me thinking that I am not sure now who to be true to, Shay or Shayla." To his embarrassment, tears started to flow down his cheeks and Sonia quickly produced a tissue to help him. She reached out and took his hand and gave it a firm squeeze. "Shayla," she said, "please listen to me." Shay looked at her and she continued, "I am a mathematician, but like your mother I too studied philosophy, although not like she did. Who am I, is one of the great questions and has been asked by people for thousands of years. I don't pretend to know the answer, but I am going to give you an answer, my answer. I am partly a product of events earlier in my life which set me on a certain course. Had events been different I might have developed different interests and gone in different directions. Even now there are always countless potential Sonias who might have been here now instead of this one. So too with you. 1 month ago your path was in a definite direction, but due to events it has sharply changed direction. But Shayla, the essential you, your values, your sense of integrity and decency is still there, is still constant. That is what Polonius meant, or at least that is how I interpret his words. You have the unique opportunity to experience life as a boy and as a girl. For now you have chosen to live as a girl, so embrace it and be the best girl you can be, and your life will be immeasurably richer. Whether you become Shay or Shayla, the real you will still be there, will shine through. Shay had not taken his eyes off Sonia during her speech. He continued to stare at her before finally saying, "Thank you, Sonia." They finished their meal in near silence and Claire paid the bill and they returned to the car for the journey home. Once there, Shay explained that he felt very tired and needed to sleep. He paused at the foot of the stairs and said to Claire and Sonia, "Thank you both for this evening, I don't think I will ever forget it." The next day was Sunday and they spent it quietly, reading, listening to music and walks in the surrounding countryside. After dinner, Claire said, "Shayla, we will be leaving at 7:30 tomorrow for your first training session where you get to meet the rest of the crew. I have asked Carrie, the girl who broke her arm, to come as well to meet you and also to still feel part of the team. Get a good night's sleep and be ready for a hard but exciting day." On the river, Shay assembled all his kit for training, showered and went to bed. When he awoke to the sound of Claire tapping on his door, the sun was streaming through the curtains and he quickly dressed and joined Claire downstairs. She handed him a cup of tea and said, "We will be eating after the session. You won't want food in your stomach before the session because it won't stay there for long once you start to work." Shay was feeling decidedly nervous as they drove to the river, not because of the prospect of a tough session but at the thought of meeting the other girls and how they would react to him. Sensing this, Claire said, "Shayla, I expect you are worried about the sort of reception you will receive from the other girls. Well, you needn't worry. I explained to them that you had gender dysphoria and were transitioning and they were very supportive. There is so much about that now in the news that teens don't regard it as anything special." Shay was about to speak but Claire interrupted him. "I know, Shayla, I know, that is not strictly true, but it is the easiest way to handle the situation." They parked at the clubhouse and made their way down to the dock where they saw 4 girls standing around talking, one of whom had her arm in a cast. As Claire and Shay approached, the girls stepped forward to meet them. "Morning, Miss Kenton," they chorused. "Morning, girls. I hope that you are feeling fit and eager for our first session on the water. This is Shayla, who I told you about." A dark-haired girl who was a little taller than Shay stepped forwards and extended her hand. "Hi, Shayla, I'm Kristen," she said. "It's really good of you to step in and help us at such short notice. This is Sam and Sherry," she said, pointing to the other girls. "And this is Carrie, who you are subbing for." Shay was delighted when the other girls came forward and gave him a warm, welcoming hug. "It's really nice to meet you," said Shay. "Miss Kenton has told me a little about how well you are doing and I promise that I will do my best not to let you down. I feel so honored to be part of your team until Carrie is back with you." "Don't worry, Shayla, you will be fine," said Sam with a warm smile. "Okay, girls," said Claire briskly, "time to get started. Shayla, I want you in the number 3 seat for now and you others will be in your usual places." They took their places and pushed off into the river. Claire climbed into a small inflatable with an electric motor and cruised up beside them. "Let's do easy stroking for 15–20 minutes so that you can get your rhythm and then we can up the tempo," Claire called out. Kristen, who was in the stroke seat, set an easy pace which Shay was grateful for until he started to feel the precise mechanics of his stroke slowly return. He began to enjoy the feel of the boat's glide across the water. Once she was satisfied with their warm-up, Claire called out for a faster stroke rate for a 3-minute stretch. They repeated this 8 times, each one a little higher rate than the last. By the time they had completed the last set, the girls were all beginning to sag, and so after a cooling down period of another 15 minutes they headed back to the dock where they pulled the boat from the river and stacked it in the boat shed. Claire then took them into the clubhouse for a well-earned breakfast. "You girls looked good out there, especially as you have not rowed for over a month. How did it feel with your new teammate?" asked Claire. "Shayla fit in really well," said Sam, and the other girls voiced their agreement, much to Shayla's relief. They had training sessions scheduled each morning for the week and by Friday Claire began to push them harder. The actual rowing became longer and faster and they also began dry land training, which was a combination of strength and aerobic work. They were all quite tired at the end of the Friday session, but over breakfast they started to revive and they all began to chatter and giggle freely. I'm reading a really good book at the moment, said Kristen. It's called The Boys in the Boat, about the American eight which won the gold medal at the Olympics in 1936. They really had to overcome a lot of difficulties to get there. Hey, maybe we could write one about us and call it The Boy in the Boat, blurted out Sam. There was a sudden silence and Sam looked horrified. Oh my God, Shayla, I'm so sorry, she said, turning bright red. All eyes were on Shay, who surprised them by throwing back his head and roaring with laughter. Sam, that's absolutely brilliant, he said after he eventually recovered. I think you should write it. The tension in the group immediately vanished and they quickly went back to their animated conversations. As they broke up and headed towards the car park, Claire said to Shay, Shayla, that was very classy how you took that tactless remark of Sam's and didn't show her up. Oh, I thought it was really funny, said Shay. Just as they reached the car, Kristen caught up with them. Shayla, if you aren't doing anything this weekend, would you like to go into Oxford and just hang out? We could look around and maybe do some shopping. Shay flushed with pleasure. I'd love to, Kristen, if that's okay with you, Miss Kenton, he said anxiously. Claire said, I think that is an excellent idea, Kristen. How had you thought of getting there? Oh, we could just hitchhike, said Kristen, keeping a straight face long enough to see the look of horror on Claire's face. Just teasing, she said. I can get a ride in with my mom and we could swing by and pick up Shayla, but I'm not sure about getting back. Well, either Sonia or I would be happy to bring you home. In fact, I think that Sonia has to be in Oxford for work-related matters, so it won't be a problem. Kristen and Shayla exchanged phone numbers before they parted. Feeling better about fitting in, Shayla? Asked Claire. Much, said Shayla with a smile. The next morning, Shay dressed in an above-knee denim skirt, t-shirt and sandals. He also selected a lightweight cotton hoodie which would fit into a small backpack when not needed. While he was looking forward to his day with Kristen, he was a little nervous about meeting her mother. He need not have been. Kristen's mother was very warm and friendly and treated him just like any other girlfriend of her daughter's. She was taking the train into London, so she dropped them near the city center and told them to enjoy themselves. What would you like to do first, Shayla? Asked Kristen. I hadn't really thought too much about that, admitted Shayla. It's just nice to be able to hang out with a friend. Do you have any ideas? Oh yes, said Kristen decisively. I have to get some underwear, but after that we can browse the shops for a while. I am afraid that I am a bit low on cash, so I can't make any big slashes. How are you for cash? I've got about £50, which won't go very far, said Shay, but my stepmother set up an account for me at Marks and Spencer's which I can use. It's not the most fashionable of places, but they sometimes have reasonable stuff. I love M&S, said Kristen. I've got some really cool stuff there before. Right, here's my plan. First M&S, and then I thought we could get a picnic lunch and wander around some of the colleges. Many of them have really beautiful grounds and they are not as busy this time of year. Kristen, that sounds brilliant. Let's go, said Shay enthusiastically. In Marks and Spencer's, Kristen bought a few pair of panties and then they started looking at other clothes. They happily drifted around the store examining the various displays. Shay took careful note of how Kristen would select items off a rack and scrutinize them carefully before putting them back. He was used to going into a shop and just grabbing something quickly and leaving. Now he was learning the art of shopping as a teenage girl. They stopped in the denim section where Kristen picked up a short denim skirt. I made a mistake wearing jeans, she said. It's already getting warm and I'll be sweltering by this afternoon. You made the right choice with your skirt. I'm envious. Why don't you get it? Asked Shay. Maybe, replied Kristen, but let's see what else they have before I decide. They stopped at a rack holding short leather skirts and Kristen picked one up and held it in front of Shay. Shayla, you would really rock this skirt. Do you have a leather skirt? No, I don't, replied Shay. Do you really think it would suit me? Absolutely, said Kristen firmly. Every girl needs a leather skirt. You must try it on. They drifted around the store and eventually found themselves back at the denim section. While Kristen was looking at the skirt again, Shay picked up a short denim jacket. Kristen, how do you think this would go with the leather skirt? He asked. Put it on and I'll hold the skirt up in front of you. Wow, that looks great, Shayla. You must buy it. Only if you get the denim skirt as well, replied Shay. But what if I see something I like even better, said Kristen. Get that too, said Shay promptly. Kristen laughed and said, you have a great attitude, Shayla, but as I said, my cash reserves are a bit low, and she reluctantly replaced the skirt on the rack. Shay promptly grabbed it again. I have an account, remember. Oh Shayla, I can't possibly expect your stepmother to pay for that, protested Kristen. Kristen, it would give me very great pleasure to make my stepmother pay, said Shay grimly. Let's just check that they fit and then we can move on. They each found a change room where they tried on their selections and then met outside. They both stated that the other looked just perfect and decided that they would wear the new skirts out of the store. An assistant helped them bag up their old clothes, which were able to fit in the backpacks they had each brought. A quick trip to the food section and they were able to stock up on lunch items. Once outside, Kristen said, thanks so much Shayla, I feel so much cooler in this skirt. And she gave him a quick hug. Kristen then led the way through the streets of Oxford and turned into an old building with high arched entrance. This is Balliol College, she said. It's one of the oldest in Oxford, about 900 years. They walked under the arch and came into a large quadrangle with a lush green lawn in the center. I just love wandering through these wonderful old colleges and thinking about some of the people who studied here over the years, said Kristen. Of course, nearly all of them were men. Women have only been admitted for the last 100 years or so. What a tragic waste, said Shayla. Just think of how the world would be better if everyone had the chance of a good education. Kristen smiled and said, you will soon find, dear Shayla, that the path for women is still a lot different from the one men can walk on. I'm learning and I'll learn a lot more, Shay assured her. When they visited Christ Church College, they were so taken by the beauty of the gardens with the flowers in full bloom that they decided to have their lunch on the grass beside one of the flower beds. Shayla, said Kristen, I want you to know that I think you were very brave in making this transition. I have no idea how hard it must be, but I want you to know that I will help you as much as I can. This may sound strange, after all I hardly know you, but I feel that there is some sort of bond between us. I hope that doesn't sound too weird. It's not weird at all, Kristen, replied Shay. Your words mean more to me than you can possibly imagine, thank you. The past few weeks have been very hard, and knowing that I have you and I think the other girls as friends makes it so much easier. You really are a wonderful person, Shayla. The way you reacted to Sam's blunder, it was just great, said Kristen. Oh, that was nothing, I really thought it was funny, said Shay, chuckling at the memory. They ate in silence for a while until Kristen said, Shayla, back in the shop when you were buying me the skirt, you said that it would give you great pleasure to make your stepmother pay. I know I'm being nosy, but it sounded as though you don't like her very much. Shay gave a short bark of laughter and said, that is a supreme understatement, Kristen. I am as close as I can be to hating her. It sounds as though she has hurt you badly, said Kristen sympathetically. Do you want to talk about it? Shay briefly described the death of first his beloved mother and then his father and his recent times at his previous school. Shayla, that is dreadful. She sounds a real bitch. I don't suppose she is any comfort during your transition, said Kristen. To Kristen's surprise, Shay suddenly started to laugh in a strange, brittle manner. Shayla, what is it? She asked, gripping his arm anxiously. Shay didn't speak for a while, but eventually he seemed to make a decision. Come on, Kristen, let's walk along the river. I've got to talk to you and tell you the truth. I just hope you won't hate me for it, he said. How could I possibly hate you? Asked Kristen incredulously. Because I'm an imposter, said Shay bitterly. Shayla, whatever do you mean? Said Kristen, thoroughly confused. Give me a minute to collect my thoughts, said Shay. They walked in silence until they reached a path on the banks of the River Cherwell behind Lady Margaret Hall. Shay headed over to a seat and turned to face Kristen. Kristen, I am not really transitioning, at least I don't think I am, he said. Kristen listened with growing astonishment as Shay told her about his stepmother's devious plot to deprive him of his education. Shayla, this sounds so unbelievable, she cried. I know, said Shay bitterly. Unfortunately, it is completely true, as Miss Kenton can verify only too well. She has also been a victim of my stepmother's machinations. But surely there must be something you can do, cried Kristen. After all, what she is doing amounts to fraud and a shocking abuse of her responsibility as a guardian. As far as the will is concerned, the solicitor believes that she has the right to stipulate what school I attend, and as far as me transitioning, it would be her word against mine. I'm sure that I went before the courts I would have a good case, but you know how long that would take and I still might lose my education. Unfortunately, she has all the money and I don't at this stage. So you are prepared to live as a girl in order to preserve your education? Asked Kristen in amazement. Yes, I am, replied Shay without hesitation. Kristen shook her head in disbelief. Shayla, this has come as a tremendous shock. I'm having trouble processing it. Please give me a moment. Take as long as you need, said Shay. Shayla, please wait here. I just want to walk a little by myself. Don't worry, I won't leave you, said Kristen, getting to her feet and setting off down the path. Shay sat in gloomy silence for 20 minutes until Kristen returned. She squeezed his hand reassuringly and said, Shayla, I want to ask you some questions. Please answer me truthfully. I will, said Shay. I am so sorry to have deceived you, Kristen. Kristen held up her hand to stop him from saying more. Okay, here goes, she said. Question 1. Are you enjoying being a girl? Shay looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. Question 2. Will you stay as a girl when this is over? A week ago I would have said no, definitely not. Now I'm not as certain. Living as a girl for this short time has given me new insight into the world and myself as a person. I'm starting to see the world through a girl's eyes, and I don't think I'll ever be the same. Question 3. Do you plan to continue with this plan now you have told me the truth? Yes, said Shay. Question 4. A personal one, I'm afraid. Are you attracted to boys? No, as I told Miss Kenton, I'm a confirmed lesbian. Final question. Are you attracted to me? Yes, very much. Oh fuck, thank goodness for that, cried Kristen, flinging herself at Shay, seizing him around the neck and sobbing uncontrollably. Shay was too startled to speak, and it was a few minutes before Kristen was able to. Shayla, this may sound crazy, but I'm in love with you. I felt something between us shortly after we met, but with you transitioning I couldn't believe it was true. Now I know it is. I'm just so relieved, she said and started to cry again. Shay held her tightly and gradually her tears subsided. I'm sorry, Shayla. I didn't expect to be so emotional. I'm not too steady myself, admitted Shay. This all seems so unreal. One minute we were two girls hanging out together, and next you know my darkest secrets and tell me you are in love with me. Is there more surprises to come? I hope not, said Kristen, but you never know when you venture into the world of the female. It seems a pretty good world right now, said Shay. You know what you are doing, don't you? Asked Kristen. No, what? You are turning me into a lesbian if you stay as a girl. If you go back to being a boy, I'll be straight. What I'm trying to say is I don't care what you are. I know I'm in love with you. I know we are only 16, but wasn't that the age Romeo and Juliet were? Well, we are not ending up like them, said Shay firmly. Come on, let's get some coffee, and then it's probably time to call Sonia. They walked for a while, jet delighting in each other's company. They found a small cafe and sat sipping lattes while going over the events of the day. I've got some family things tomorrow, said Kristen, but after training on Monday perhaps you can come to my house. I'm sure my mom could run you home in the evening. Shay's face lit up. I would really love that, he said. Shay called Sonia and arranged a pickup time and place with her. They decided to spend the remaining time on the river where they hired a punt. The weather was still warm and Kristen lay back on some cushions while Shay steered the craft through a gaggle of other boaters to a quieter section of the river. He spotted an ideal place underneath a willow whose branches drooped into the water. He tied the mooring rope to one of the branches and joined Kristen on the cushions. She sat back a little and pulled his head onto her lap. Shay gazed up at her, feeling a slow wave of sheer happiness wash over him. Kristen, I haven't felt this happy in years, he said dreamily. Neither have I, she replied and bent down and kissed him softly on the lips. Shay responded immediately and soon they were locked in a passionate embrace which lasted a long time. Eventually they disentangled themselves and lulled by the soft slap of water on the bottom of the punt they both drifted off to sleep. An hour later they both woke with a start and had to scramble to untether the punt and hasten back to the boat shed in order to keep their rendezvous with Sonia. They arrived at the same time as Sonia, slightly out of breath from having run the last few hundred yards. Sonia smiled as she greeted them and said, "Well, I can tell that you two enjoyed yourselves." "How can you tell?" asked Shay. "It's pretty obvious, my dear Shayla," was Sonia's amused reply. The next day after training, Claire dropped Shay off at Kristen's house and stayed a while to talk to Kristen's mother. Kristen took Shay upstairs and suggested that he use the shower first. When he emerged wrapped in a towel, Kristen pointed to her closet and said, "Shayla, help yourself to any of my clothes, I'm interested to see what you choose." When she returned, she was amused to see that Shay had selected a summer dress with a full skirt. "Shayla, do you only wear pants when you are training?" she asked. Shay looked a little embarrassed and replied, "Yes, at first it was Miss Kenton's idea. She thought that it would help me adapt to behaving like a girl more quickly, but to be perfectly honest, I have come to love the feel of skirts and dresses and the way they move against my leg." "Do you mind?" "Not at all. In fact, I love having you as a girly boy girlfriend." "That's good," said Shay, relieved, "because I borrowed this as well," and he raised the hem of the dress to reveal a lacy white petticoat. "Oh, Shayla, you are funny," said Kristen, laughing. "Girls hardly ever wear slips and petticoats these days." "This girl does," said Shay primly. "That's one of the reasons I love you," said Kristen, throwing her arms around Shay's neck and kissing him hard on the lips. After Kristen got dressed, they went down to the kitchen to eat some lunch. "Shayla," said Kristen as they sat at the table, "I have been giving a lot of thought to what you told me about that rotten thing your awful stepmother has done to you. My aunt is a barrister in London and she is really good. Well, I hope you don't mind, but I saw her yesterday at a family gathering and I told her what she had done to you and why. You aren't cross with me, are you?" At first Shay looked a little alarmed, but then he smiled and said, "Kristen, I would find it very hard to be cross with you." "Oh, good," she said, much relieved. "Well, anyway," she said that it was one of the most despicable acts by a guardian that she had ever experienced, and she gave me some ideas as to what we might do. "We?" asked Shay with a smile. "Yes, we," said Kristen firmly. "We are in this together, Shayla, and I am sure the other girls in the boat are as well." "You haven't told them, have you?" asked Shay anxiously. "Of course not, silly. I would only do that if you wanted me to, but do let me go on." And Kristen began to explain some of the things her aunt had told her. As they discussed it further, a plan began to form in both their minds, and as their conversation continued it became more detailed. "If we can get her the information she needs, I am sure that she would represent you. Now enough of this plotting for now. I have some more dresses upstairs that I would love to see you model." And so for Shay the afternoon passed in a delightful swish and swirl of skirts, slips and petticoats. Kristen's mother insisted that Shay stay for dinner, and it was after 9 p.m. that he arrived home. He was greeted by Claire brandishing a postcard. "This is the sum total of greetings from that ghastly stepmother of yours, Shayla," she said. "She writes, New York wonderful, a shopper's paradise, trust all is well, Mandy." She ground her teeth and went on, "Not a word about how you are doing, and not a word of thanks for Sonia and I for taking care of you. The woman is an utter bitch." "I am so sorry," said Shay. "I hate being a burden on you and Sonia." "Oh, I'm sorry, Shayla. None of this is your fault. You are much more a victim than we are, and you most certainly are not a burden. It has been wonderful having you. Please forget what I said." "I can't say anything right now," said Shay, "but there may be a way of getting back at her after I start school." Claire pressed him for details, but Shay would not say any more. 1 month later, towards the end of July, Carrie had recovered sufficiently from her injury to rejoin the boat. It took the crew a few days to adjust to their returning teammate, but they were soon rowing as smoothly as ever, and Carrie was sure that they were now faster than before her injury. Shay continued to attend training, always taking part in the land drills and also subbing for other crews who were short for a day. He proved an enormous source of encouragement to all the rowers, but especially to Kristen and the other girls in the 4-boat. Often he would ride with Claire in the outboard, taking times and recording them as Claire shouted instructions. During the dry land training, Shay pushed himself as hard as possible, which had the effect of making the girls and the crew match his efforts. After training, he would often spend time with the 4 girls and was delighted that he seemed to be so well accepted. In turn, they did their best to help him present and behave more like a girl. The regatta was scheduled to take place 1 week before the start of school, and the crew spent as much time as they could making final preparations. Claire and the 4 girls were enormously impressed at how enthusiastic Shay was about the event and that he did not appear to show any disappointment that he could not participate. When the big day finally arrived, the girls all traveled together in the school bus together with a sizable contingent of supporters to cheer them on. Shay and Kristen sat together, and Shay spent the entire journey helping Kristen stay relaxed. They made their way to the boat shed and made final adjustments before lowering it into the river. The junior girls' 4 was one of the early races, and 2 from each heat would qualify for the final in the afternoon. Just before the girls got in the boat, Shay handed something to Kristen. "What's this?" she asked. "Just a small good luck charm, not that you will need it, but I wanted you to have something from me so I could feel like I was rowing with you," said Shay. Kristen opened her hand and saw a silver necklace with a pendant of 2 crossed oars. "Shayla, it's beautiful. Please fasten it round my neck. I just feel that now no one will be able to beat us." She was right, as the Highcliffe 4 rode to a comfortable victory and an automatic place in the final. Shay's inclination was to leave the girls some space so that they could prepare themselves mentally for the final, but they were adamant that he was just as much a crew member and that they should all be together. Shay kept busy attending to any needs that the girls had and also keeping them relaxed with jokes and idle chatter. When the time came for the final, he hugged each girl, although Kristen's hug was harder, and told them above all to enjoy the moment. He and Claire then watched with great anxiety as the race unfolded. There were 2 crews from schools that had a long history in rowing, and these schools were usually first and second in any year. Highcliffe's plan was to stay with the favorites until the last 200 meters and then throw everything into a final sprint. With just over 200 meters to the finish, Highcliffe and the favorites were level, and then it seemed that the Highcliffe 4 faltered a little. Shay found his heart drop, but somehow Kristen found some inner strength. Later she would say that she felt the necklace Shay had given her brush against her chest, and in a desperate burst Highcliffe crossed a couple of feet ahead of the other crews. Shay, Claire and the Highcliffe supporters erupted with wild cries of delight and rushed down to the dock to congratulate Kristen and her team. During the medal presentation that followed the race, Shay found himself shedding tears of pride and joy, and Claire was similarly moved. "I can't believe it," she kept saying. "Highcliffe has never even placed in any of the regatta races, and now we have won. I'm overjoyed." When the last race was completed, the Highcliffe team filed onto the waiting bus, which was to take them back into Oxford. Claire had a word with the driver, and the girls were surprised when they pulled up at a popular fast food restaurant. "Okay girls," cried Claire, "I think a celebration is in order. All you can eat and the school will pay." This was greeted with whoops of delight as 20 hungry girls crowded into the restaurant. Shay found himself herded into a booth with Kristen and the rest of the crew, and he sat back in utter contentment listening to his crewmates reliving their triumph on the river. After a substantial meal, Claire got the girls back on the bus and they headed off back to the school where their parents were picking them up. Before they parted, Kristen, Sam, Carrie and Sherry arranged with Claire to collect Shay on the next day to take him shopping for his new school uniform. "Thank you girls, that will be a big help," said Claire. "I am really busy with the approach of the new term, so your offer is greatly appreciated." When Claire and Shay finally arrived home, Sonia had made a delicious chocolate mousse dessert as a celebration, and full as they were, Claire and Shay could not resist. "I knew you would win," said Sonia, "so I felt very confident about making you a treat." They talked excitedly for a while until fatigue overtook Shay and he excused himself and once in bed fell into a deep, immensely pleasurable sleep. In the morning he joined Sonia and Claire for breakfast as usual. Claire said, "Shayla, I will take you over to Kristen's house and her mom will drive you into Oxford where you will meet up with the others. I have booked you into the salon for 10 a.m. to get your hair done before school starts. Kristen is booked for the same time. I am sure the other 3 will find something to keep them busy. The girls will help you get the proper uniform and I've established an account at the school store in Oxford. Don't worry about any of the sports clothes except a tennis skirt, because we need to discuss which sports you are going to be in this year. Maybe we can do that tonight." As the weather was still warm, Shay wore a short dark blue skirt with a white floral print and a white t-shirt. When they arrived at Kristen's house, she greeted him with a hug and a passionate kiss that lasted a long time. Still feeling high from yesterday? Asked Shay. Yes, but not as high as I feel now, was the reply. Kristen's mother dropped them at the salon where they had arranged to meet the other girls. They were seated in adjoining chairs and were able to chatter continuously as Anna and her staff fussed over them. Shay's hair had grown longer and Anna was able to curl and feather the ends which now reached to his shoulders. Kristen insisted that they both get manicures and pedicures and decided that Shay's nails would be a light pink color. I just love you looking all girly, she giggled. Before Shay could reply, they heard a gaggle of voices in the waiting room and in walked Sherry, Sam and Carrie looking very pleased with themselves. Wow, Shayla, you look great, said Sam and then hastily added, you too, Kristen. The three girls were wearing tight jeans and despite the warm weather had hoodies on over their t-shirts. We've brought you both a present, announced Carrie, but you mustn't look. How will we know what it is? Asked Kristen practically. You have to come with us into the ladies and close your eyes and we will help you on with it, replied Carrie. Once inside the ladies' toilet they made Kristen and Shay take off their tops and then close their eyes. Absolutely no peeping, said Sam as she and Sherry pulled t-shirts on over the heads of Kristen and Shay. Okay, you can look at each other now. When Kristen and Sam opened their eyes they gave a little gasp as they saw on the t-shirt the other was wearing a copy of a photograph of the five of them taken just after their win. Underneath in large print were the words, "The girls in the boat." You are really one of us now, Shayla, said Sam. And always will be, added Sherry. Shay felt tears run down his cheeks as he hugged each of his crewmates. That is the greatest thing you could have said, he sniffed. All five left the salon proudly wearing their memento and headed into the town. They decided to get Shay's uniform first and then have a girls' day out, as Kristen put it. There was a clothing shop that carried Highcliff's uniforms and Shay was sent into a changing room and the others set about getting him the required clothes. The skirt was a pleated gray and black tartan which Kristen explained was the Douglas clan tartan. You will need at least two and they must be knee-length or the head will have a fit, explained Sam. The blouse was a simple white cotton and they selected 4. 2 black sweaters and a black blazer were added to the growing pile as well as 5 pair of white ankle socks and 5 pairs of dark tights for the colder weather. The shop agreed to hold Shay's purchases until they returned later that afternoon and so unencumbered the 5 went off for the girls' day out. They stopped for lunch at a sandwich bar and during the meal Sam turned to Shay and said, Shayla, we meant what we said earlier, you are one of us now, so don't worry about school, we will all be right with you every step of the way, not that you need it, you make a great girl. Shay blushed with pleasure and said, Sam, thank you so much, you have no idea what that means to me. I must admit that I have been very nervous about being a new girl at school, literally in my case, he added with a laugh. The rest of the day was spent with some shopping but mostly the 5 of them took great pleasure in hanging out together. Are you happy, Shayla? Asked Kristen when they were walking together. I am always happy when I am with you but today seems really special. I think I am beginning to understand what it means to be part of a sisterhood and I love the feeling. Maybe you won't want to go back, said Kristen. I think that when the time comes it will be a hard decision but in the meantime I am going to do my best at enjoying being a girl. I'll make sure of it, smiled Kristen. Eventually it was time to collect Shay's uniforms and head home. See you next Monday at school, Sam called out as Shay and Kirsten climbed into her mom's car. Kristen whispered something to her mother as they drove along and seemed pleased with the reply. When they arrived at Claire and Sonia's house, Kristen turned to Shay and said, Shayla, would you like to come for a sleep over Wednesday night? Shay was delighted. I'd love to, he said. I'll need to check with Miss Kenton first. He ran inside and emerged a few minutes later beaming with delight. She said yes. Oh, thank you so much. I can hardly wait till Wednesday. The sleepover on Wednesday, Shay packed an overnight bag and Sonia drove him over to Kristen's house. Now Shayla, just remember you are a young lady, Claire, and I trust you not to let us down. I am sure you know what I mean, warned Sonia. I know exactly what you mean, smiled Shay. And I promise to behave like a demure young lady, he called as he rushed up to the front door and embraced Kristen who had hurried out to meet him. What was that about? Asked Kristen. It was my first lecture on behaving like a well-brought-up young lady, laughed Shay. Young ladies are just made to be seduced, said Kristen. Oh, Kristen, promise me you will seduce me, implored Shay. I promise, said Kristen solemnly. Kristen House was in a country area near a public footpath with access to beautiful countryside and forest. They took lunch in Kristen's large black and white mongrel called Mordecai and headed off for a joyous day of rambling. They talked about their respective childhoods and their hopes for the future, which included university and travel to exotic places. You know, said Shay, I am almost grateful to my despicable stepmother for what she did. Not only have I met the most wonderful girl imaginable, but I am experiencing part of life I would never have known. I always loved and admired my mother, and somehow being a girl for the last 2 months has brought me closer to her. I'm sure she would have understood and been very proud of you, said Kristen. They arrived home in the late afternoon, 2 tired and happy girls and 1 tired and happy dog. They had dinner with Kristen's mother and then went into the large family room to watch movies. What would you like to watch? Asked Kristen. Something funny and romantic, replied Shay. They settled on Love Actually, and although they had both seen it before, it seemed to have more meaning as they watched it curled up together on the couch. By the time the film ended, they were both feeling ready for bed and went upstairs saying good night to Kristen's mother. You use the bathroom first, said Kristen as she started to undress. A few minutes later, Shay emerged wearing a very pretty long nightdress. You like, he said smiling as he flared out the skirt. Kristen did not answer, she just grabbed him by the neck and kissed him fiercely on the lips. Eventually they parted and Kristen went into the bathroom for a few minutes. When she got back, she wearing a short pink baby doll nightdress which Shay could not take his eyes off. Kristen slid into bed and immediately embraced Shay. They lay for a few minutes, bodies locked together, until Kristen said awkwardly, Shayla, I would love to, you know, Let me guess, said Shay gently, you would love to have sex with me, but... Well, yes, but... Hush, my sweet girl, he said, placing a finger on her lips. Don't forget that I promised to behave like a perfect young lady, and so I will make love to you like a young lady, not a man. Oh, Shayla, I do love you, said a relieved Kristen. Where would you like to be kissed and touched? Asked Shay. Everywhere, my darling Shayla. And so he did, starting with her lips and slowly moving down her throat. He gently lifted up her baby doll and began kissing and licking the nipples of her breasts. Kristen groaned with pleasure and clung tightly to Shay. Just when she thought that the feelings could not get any better, Shay eased her legs wider apart and began to delicately kiss and lick her clitoris. Now Kristen's moans turned to muted cries of pleasure which gradually built to the point of an overwhelming orgasm. Kristen had to cover her mouth to stop her shrieks being heard all over the house. She laid still, feeling absolutely drained, for several minutes. Shayla darling, that was indescribable, she managed to say at last. I'm loving being a lesbian. Me too, sighed Shay contentedly. Well, in that case it's my turn to ravish you, you wicked girl, said Kristen, rolling Shay onto his back, lifting his long silky gown and taking his very hard shaft into her mouth and caressing it with her tongue. Shay was already highly aroused, and it did not take long before he began pumping what seemed like pints of cum into Kristen's mouth. She pulled his head towards her and, kissing him hard on the lips, shared some of his essence with her lover. They lay for a while in each other's arms until they both became drowsy and, still clinging to each other, fell into a deep dreamless sleep. When they woke the next morning, they repeated the passion of the night until they heard Kristen's mother making noise in the kitchen in a not-so-subtle reminder that it was time to get up. They went downstairs, still in dressing gowns over their night clothes, to find breakfast ready on the terrace. As they ate, Shay asked Kristen if she thought that her aunt was still interested in his case. Oh yes, she is, replied Kristen, and that reminds me, she had some ideas as to how we might get the evidence you need to expose her awful schemes. Shay listened with growing interest as Kristen outlined her aunt's ideas. I can't wait to see her face in court, he said. They spent a leisurely day together until Shay had to return home in the late afternoon. I have to go away for a few days with my family, but I have arranged with Mom and Miss Kenton that we will take you to school on Saturday, said Kristen as they parted. Highcliffe, the last few days of the long summer holiday were spent getting ready for the new school term. Shay was finishing packing his large trunk when Claire came into his bedroom. Shayla, I should have done this earlier, but I need to discuss with you the sports that would be available to you. Unfortunately, some of the sports where we compete against other schools would not be available to you, but within school competition would be fine. We do our best to accommodate individual choices where possible. For example, we have a very successful martial arts program as well as different forms of dance, fencing, as well as the core sports tennis, hockey, netball, swimming and athletics. You don't have to decide now, but please give it some thought. You and the others in the four will be school celebrities, which should make your introduction to Highcliffe easier. Shay promised to give serious thought to Claire's words and then finished packing. Because Shay was leaving for school the next day night, Sonia cooked a special dinner and she and Claire, sensing Shay's nervousness, did their best to encourage him. Shayla, we all know that your stepmother put you in an impossible position, but even at this stage you don't have to go through with it, said Sonia, laying a hand on Shay's arm. Shay smiled. Thank you, Sonia. You and Claire, I mean Miss Kenton, have been wonderful, but for the near future I am a Highcliffe girl 100%. Don't worry about me, I have great support. He paused a moment before adding, my stepmother won't be so lucky. The next morning Shay did his hair and slowly dressed in his school uniform, a plain bra and panties, white ankle socks, black Mary Janes with 1-inch heels, white blouse and finally his skirt. He fastened the skirt at the back and turned to look at himself in the mirror as he slowly drew up the zip. There, Shayla, now you are really a proper English schoolgirl, he whispered as he performed a mock curtsy to the image in the mirror. An hour later, Kristen and her mother arrived and Shay's trunk was loaded into the car and they set off for Highcliffe. Sensing Shay's nervousness, Kristen kept up a constant stream of idle chatter throughout the 40-minute journey, which only stopped when the car swept through the school gates. A porter was on hand to manage their trunks, and after bidding her mother goodbye, Kristen led Shay into the ivy-clad main building and along a marble-floored corridor to the school office. The school secretary, Mrs. Sims, greeted them warmly and consulted a list on her desk. Miss Shayla, you will be in Keith's house with Miss Kristen here. Miss Kristen, can you please take Miss Shayla over there once she has seen the headmistress? She beckoned for Shay to follow her across the room and knocked softly on a large oak-paneled door. A voice bade them enter and Shay was ushered into a large office with bay windows giving out to a view of the school. The headmistress, Mrs. Vincent, rose from her desk and stepped forwards to greet Shay. Shay had imagined a stern-looking older woman with iron-gray hair and was surprised to see a very attractive woman in her late 30s with long dark hair and a pleasant smile. Shayla, I'm very glad to meet you. Please have a seat. Miss Kenton has told me a lot about you and your unusual situation. I understand that Highcliffe was not your idea of a school, but Miss Kenton assures me that you are fully committed to being one of our students. It will not be easy for you to have to suddenly adapt to being a schoolgirl, but we will all do our best to help you. Do you have any questions? No, Mrs. Vincent, I am grateful to you and Miss Kenton for allowing me to continue my education here, and I will do my very best to fit in, said Shay seriously. Good girl, said Mrs. Vincent briskly. Now off you go and Kristen will show you to your new home. As Shay was leaving, Mrs. Vincent called after him, oh, by the way, Shayla, congratulations to you and the rest of the girls in the rowing four, we are all very proud of you. Once outside, Kristen gave Shay a quick tour of the school grounds before stopping at Keith's house, which was to be their home for the next year. Although the central building was hundreds of years old, the classroom blocks and the residential buildings were quite modern. The grounds were very extensive with grassed playing fields, tennis courts and a large gymnasium complex. As you already know, we take our sports seriously here, said Kristen as she pointed out the various features. Have you decided what games you are going to do? She asked. Miss Kenton told me that I could not be on any of the school teams where Highcliffe plays other schools in case people felt that I had an advantage, but I would like to try netball and tennis. I don't think being a boy, I mean having been a boy, Shayla added with a grin, will be much advantage in netball. I do martial arts, said Kristen. Would you like to join me? I'd love to, said Shay. Kristen, please don't laugh. But I thought that I might also try ballet. I saw a production of Swan Lake once and thought it was terrific. I also thought that it helped me move in a more feminine manner so I can fit in better. Kristen gave Shay a quick hug and said, You really are serious about making this work, aren't you, Shayla darling? Yes, Kristen, I am serious. To be anything less would be an insult to all the other girls. What about theater? We have a very good program here, asked Kristen. Certainly, as long as I don't have to take on one of the boy parts, said Shay, and they both laughed. Finally, Kristen took Shay into Keith's house and showed him around. The ground floor had a large dining room, a common room, and various studios for arts and crafts. Our bedrooms are on the third floor, said Kristen, leading the way upstairs and along a long corridor. She stopped at number 37 and produced a key from her pocket and opened the door. The room was small but sunny, with a bed against one wall, a desk under the window, a large wardrobe next to the bed, and ample shelving and storage space. Shay's trunk sat in the middle of the room. Opposite the bed was another door, and Kristen opened it to reveal a small bathroom with toilet, sink, and shower stall. Facing them was another door. "What's through there?" asked Shay, pointing. "That is another bedroom," said Kristen, opening the door. She lowered her voice dramatically and said, "You will need to be careful of the girl who lives in there. I think she is a lesbian and would like nothing better than to have someone like you for her wife." When Shay looked alarmed, Kristen burst out laughing. "Shayla, I'm only teasing. It's my room. Miss Kenton was able to arrange for us to share. It's okay, both doors have locks, so whoever is in there can be quite private. That is if they want to be," she added with a smirk. Shay pretended to look disappointed. "Only teasing?" he asked. "I would love to be your wife or your husband or whatever else you want." Kristen hugged him and said, "Shayla darling, you can be either one or both." Shay and Kristen helped each other unpack before Kristen suggested another walk around the school. They ended up at the tennis courts. "Fancy a game? We've got time before dinner," asked Kristen. They hurried back to their rooms and changed into their tennis skirts and blouses. Kristen was a natural sportswoman and they were well matched. After a vigorous 40 minutes on the court, they headed back to their rooms. "You can have the first shower," said Kristen as she flung herself on her bed. "The first dinner of term is a bit formal, so wear a nice dress." After showering, Shay selected a floral patterned shirt dress with a full skirt and was just putting his shoes on when there was a tap at the door, and Kristen swept in wearing a simple knee-length black dress and black shoes. "Shayla, what a pretty dress," she said enthusiastically. She gave Shay a big hug and a long kiss on the lips before stepping back and lifting the hem of Shay's dress. She squealed with delight and cried, "I knew you couldn't resist wearing a petticoat, you lovely girly girl." At dinner, Shay was delighted to see Carrie and Sam. The two girls rushed over and hugged Shay and complimented him on his pretty dress. "Oh, this old thing," said Shay dismissively, and they all burst out laughing. "Shayla, it's as though you have been doing this all your life," said Sam. "No, Sam, I'm a fast learner and I've had great teachers," Shay replied. After dinner, they went to one of the common rooms where a movie version of Emma was playing. They found it highly entertaining, especially Emma's inept attempts to match-make. After the movie, the house mistress, Miss Pringle, announced that it was time for bed, and the girls slowly made their way to their rooms. Shay and Kristen kissed passionately before retiring to their own rooms. Shay slipped into a night dress and climbed into bed, switched out the light, and lay thinking about the day and how dramatically his life was changing before drifting off to sleep. First day, Shay met up with his friends at breakfast as they all looked over their day's schedule. There were only about 40 girls in Shay's year, and they were divided into small classes of no more than 15 girls. Shay's first class was history with Mr. Vincent, who was the husband of the headmistress. He was very popular because he had the ability to make his subject really come alive and also to invite thoughts and opinions from his students. It did not hurt that he was also very good-looking, and many of his students had a crush on him. Shay's other subjects that day were English, mathematics, French, and general science. He found the standard of teaching to be excellent and immediately noticed that the classroom atmosphere was a lot different from his old school, where many of his classmates had felt it their duty to make life challenging for the teachers, who usually responded in an authoritarian manner. At Highcliffe, the teachers treated the girls more like adults, and the girls responded by taking their studies seriously. At the end of the last class, Kristen met up with Shay and said that it was time for him to sign up for some of the sports and recreational activities. The dining room was set up with various stations, and with Kristen's encouragement, Shay signed up for martial arts and a beginner's ballet class. He also put his name down for tennis and, at Kristen's insistence, the drama club. There was an hour of supervised homework before dinner and then another hour of less formal study. At 9 o'clock there was a free period of an hour where the girls could read, talk, or do what they liked. Shay was sitting in the common room talking with Kristen, Sam, and Carrie when an older girl came over and introduced herself. "You must be the new girl everyone is talking about," she said. "My name's Naomi and I'm in the year above you." Kristen and Sam looked at her coldly, but Naomi did not seem to notice. "Shayla, I've been wondering," she said with a smirk. "Why a boy would want to become a girl, it seems so strange." Kristen flushed angrily and was about to speak when Shay replied coolly, "I don't think it's strange, Naomi. You are a girl and that doesn't seem strange, does it? Is there something wrong with being a girl?" Naomi was taken aback by Shay's confident response. "Of course there's nothing wrong with being a girl, but then I didn't have much choice." Cher stared at her intently before replying sweetly, "Neither did I." "Naomi, get lost," said Sam with contempt. "She's a trouble-making bitch," said Kristen savagely when Naomi had drifted away. "Oh, I thought she was rather sweet," said Shay, and the three of them broke into fits of giggles. The PE class. Shay's first PE class was after the mid-morning break, which he was grateful for because it enabled him to change in his room before heading over to the gym. Claire assembled all the girls into a group and addressed them. "Girls, your physical education is going to be a little different this year. In addition to exercise and games, you are going to have some lectures on health-related issues and will also have some homework assignments which will contribute to your overall marks. I'm going to pair you all up with a partner so your assignment will be a joint effort. You will have a couple of weeks to do your research and then you will present your findings to the rest of the class." Claire called out names and Shay found that he was paired with a girl called Heather. Heather was a little shorter than Shay and quite overweight. Shay had noticed her in the French class that they shared because she had a particular facility in languages. "Lucky you," said Heather when they met up. "You get stuck with the fat girl for P. I hate P," she added vehemently. "Hey, don't be so hard on yourself," said Shay. "You get stuck with a wannabe girl with all the wrong plumbing." "Maybe we can swap," said Heather with a grin. "Don't tempt me," replied Shay. Claire put up a long list of possible topics on a whiteboard and told the girls to choose one before the end of the day. Claire then had the girls remain in their pairs while they did a number of fitness tests. After his long summer of training with the rowing team, Shay did well on all the tests, but Heather had great difficulty with speed and agility activities. She did much better on tests that were strength-based, however. After class, Shay walked with Heather to their rooms to change. "You did really well on the strength stuff, Heather," said Shay. "I grew up on a farm, so I'm used to lifting and throwing things around," she replied. "I'd better stay on your good side then," said Shay with a laugh. "You already have," said Heather. "I think you are nice and really brave." "Thanks, Heather," said Shay warmly. "I'm really glad that I got you as a partner. What topic do you want to do for our assignment?" "I don't really care, you choose," said Heather as they parted. At the end of the day, Shay went back to the gym and knocked on the door of Claire's office. "Shayla," she said, greeting him warmly, "how are you settling in?" "I'm sorry, I have been so busy that I haven't had time to talk to you." "I'm doing okay, Miss Kenton, thank you." "Well, now you are here, how can I help you?" "Well, it's partly about the assignment and partly something else," said Shay mysteriously. "Go on." "Heather and I would like to do something about the importance of strengthening." "That's an excellent topic, but what was the something else?" "Well, it's about Heather," Shay began awkwardly. "Yes? She hates P and she is really self-conscious of being overweight," said Shay. Claire sighed and said, "Yes, it's a real problem that I have struggled with, trying to find activities for those girls who nature has not really favored." "I have an idea that might help," said Shay tentatively. "I'm all ears," replied Claire. "Heather grew up on a farm and she has this natural strength, that's what gave me the idea for the topic. Anyway, I was thinking, why not take it further? You told me that the school goes out of its way to accommodate different activities for the students. Well, I was thinking that if we could get one of Britain's top female weightlifters to come to the school and give a demonstration, Heather and a lot of other girls could get a chance to really shine at something." Claire looked at him in astonishment. "Shayla," she finally said, You never cease to amaze me. You have only been in the school 3 days and have possibly solved a problem that has defeated me, and on top of that you have your own troubles trying to be a girl. With all that going on in your life, you reach out to a vulnerable girl and try to help her in the most practical way. You really are a very special person, and much as I loathe your stepmother, I am very glad she sent you to Highcliffe. Your idea is absolutely wonderful and I will certainly act on it. Now you had better run along, you don't want to be late for your study session. Shay blushed with pleasure at Claire's words and walked away with a distinct spring in his step. Katie Sayers visits Highcliffe 3 weeks later. The 3 senior grades assembled in the gym at the end of classes. There were about 150 girls present and all of the teachers. Claire entered with an attractive young woman dressed stylishly in a skirt and blouse with her hair nicely permed and set. She was only about 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighed about 9 stone. Claire called for attention and then introduced her guest. "Girls and staff," she began, "this is Ms. Katie Sayers, who has kindly come to our school to give a talk and demonstration that you will find most interesting and helpful. Please give her a warm welcome." Katie stepped forward and began to speak in a strong Cockney accent. She explained that she was an Olympic-style weightlifter and went on to explain in some detail why it was so important for girls to be physically strong and the great health benefits that came from strength training. She pointed to a very handsome young man who accompanied her and introduced him as her boyfriend. Together they went over to a mat that had a barbell and several weights on it and began loading them onto the bar. Katie said, "We have about 150 pounds, and Dean here is going to try to lift it over his head." Dean outweighed Katie by at least 50 pounds and was several inches taller. Despite his obviously good physique, he struggled to get the bar to chest height but was unable to raise it overhead. Katie then stepped forwards and kicked off her shoes, seized the bar and effortlessly lifted it overhead to gasps of astonishment from the audience. "Now if I want to go heavier," she said, "I will have to get changed as I can't do a proper job wearing a skirt." She went through to one of the changing rooms and returned wearing a t-shirt and shorts and proceeded to give a display of strength that astonished her audience. After she finished, she spoke again to her audience. "Before I began weightlifting, I was a fat, lazy kid who hated myself. Lucky for me, a teacher at school started me weightlifting and it has changed my life. I'm never going to win a gold medal, but I've been all over the world, represented my country at the Olympics and made dozens of great friends. Wearing a skirt doesn't mean that you can't be strong. All of you wear skirts and all of you can be strong." The girls erupted into wild applause that went on for several minutes. They crowded round Katie, asking questions and taking photos of themselves with her with their cell phones. Eventually Claire was able to restore order. She thanked Katie and Dean for coming and then said, "There are 2 others who deserve your thanks. Shayla Pegg and Heather Carstairs came up with the idea and deserve a big round of applause." They received it enthusiastically, and Shay and Heather were asked to stay after the others had departed to meet Katie. "Would you like to give it a try?" Katie asked Heather. "Sure, I'll have a go," said Heather. Over the next few minutes, Katie instructed her in the technique of safe lifting and then let her try with some light weights. Heather did so well that Katie kept increasing the load until she decided it was enough for a beginner. "You could be really good at this," Katie told Heather. "You have that raw strength that can't be taught. If you like, I could help train you." Heather thought she would burst with pride and immediately accepted Katie's offer. When Katie and Dean finally left, Heather turned to Shay and said, "Thank you, Shayla. I will never forget what you have done for me. If you want to be a girl, I will give you all the support I can." Parents' Day. It was now 4 weeks into the new term and Shay had settled in well. In addition to Kristen and the other girls from the boat and Heather, he was popular with the other girls in his classes. They liked his modest but friendly manner and also his quiet self-assurance that never seemed like arrogance. For his part, Shay really enjoyed the classes and felt that the standard of education was far higher than his old school. Perhaps most of all, he liked being in the company of girls and being accepted by them as one of their own. Neither he nor Claire had heard anything from his stepmother. Parents' Day was fast approaching, a day when the parents were able to visit their daughters and observe them in the school setting. Shay and Kristen had been waiting for this day and approached Claire and gave her some idea of what they had in mind. Claire listened carefully and promised to help them. Meanwhile, back in London, things were not going as well for Mandy. Her trip to New York had started well, but her new boyfriend quickly began to tire of his shallow girlfriend, and after a month he had bought her a ticket back to London. The fact that it was an economy fare really infuriated her. She began partying wildly and sought solace in expensive shopping trips which only served to eat into her cash reserves. She was bewildered and angry that her plan to deprive Shay of his schooling, which looked foolproof, had apparently failed. She had been so sure that Shay would leave school rather than attend as a girl. When the invitation to attend Parents' Day arrived with a handwritten note from Claire urging her to attend, her first impulse was to throw it away, but a plan began to form in her mind and she returned the invitation saying that she would love to accept. When Shay heard of this, he immediately told Kristen, who in turn phoned her aunt, the barrister. Her Aunt Catherine gave Kristen a long list of careful instructions and had Kristen write them down and read them back to her. When she was satisfied that Kristen understood exactly what they needed to do, she told her niece to contact her again immediately after Parents' Day. Parents' Day was on a Friday and the classes were shortened to accommodate the parental visits. Mandy drove the Ferrari into the visitors' car park and took her time parking to give people chance to notice her. She flowed elegantly out of the low-slung sports car and walked towards the main building in her 4-inch heels. She wore a beautifully tailored light gray dress that fit her slender figure perfectly and accentuated every curve. Claire was watching her from the window of the office and smiled to herself to see such overwhelming display of vanity. Mustering all her self-control, she went forward to greet Mandy and feigned delight at seeing her former friend. They hugged briefly and Claire was able to sustain a short conversation before she said, "Well, I mustn't keep you, Mandy. I know you are a busy woman and I expect you are anxious to see Shayla and find out how she is doing." "Ah, Shayla, such a pretty name," purred Mandy. "How is the little darling getting on in her new situation?" "On the whole, I think she is adapting well," said Claire levelly, "but you know it hasn't been easy for her." "No, of course not," said Mandy. "Such a shock to think of her like this. I can't imagine what her poor father would think. I'll get one of the girls to take you to her. I believe she has just finished her ballet class, so you can use my office to have a private meeting." "Ballet? How sweet," said Mandy with a sugary smile. Claire turned and noticed Kristen in the corridor. "Kristen, this is Mrs. Pegg. Could you please take her over to my office and send Shayla into her?" "Certainly, Miss Kenton," said Kristen, and she led Mandy out a side door where they happened to run into Sam, who had been deliberately loitering outside. "Sam, this is Mrs. Pegg, Shayla's stepmom." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Pegg. Are you here to check up on Shayla?" Mandy couldn't believe her luck in finding two of Shay's classmates so easily. "Right," she thought, "now is my chance to set that little shit up." "Yes," said Mandy brightly, "I do hope the dear is getting along all right, although I don't suppose it has been easy for him, or I mean her." "Yes," said Kristen slowly, "it's not easy learning things we all grew up doing naturally, but I do wonder if poor Shayla tries too hard." "In what way?" asked Mandy, immediately interested. "Well, I think she is trying to be too girly, thinking that is what we are all like. For example, she often wears petticoats, and really no girl does that now outside of weddings." Mandy smirked with delight and said, "Yes, well, I suppose it is not surprising." "What do you mean, Mrs. Pegg?" asked Kristen on cue. "I just hope that she is not doing anything inappropriate," said Mandy darkly. "What sort of things?" asked Sam and Kristen in unison. "I probably shouldn't say this," said Mandy, who had every intention of saying it, "but when I found her for the first time she was wearing one of my nice cocktail dresses and she was playing with herself." "You mean wanking herself?" said Sam in horror. "I'm afraid so," said Mandy sadly. "Now, as I said, I probably shouldn't have told you this and you must promise me not to tell anyone, but I thought that perhaps you ought to know." "How sick," said Kristen, screwing up her face in disgust. Mandy was beside herself with delight as she thought how quickly this news was going to spread around the school. They reached Claire's office and left Mandy there while they went to fetch Shay. "God, what a monster," said Kirsten when they were out of hearing. "I'm going to love helping to bring her down." Shay was waiting for them and shook his head in disgust when he heard what Mandy had been saying. "Okay, girls, here goes, wish me luck," he said, heading towards the office. "Try not to kill the bitch," called out Sam as Shay entered the gym. Shay gave a nervous tap on the door and opened it tentatively. He was wearing his usual school uniform and had placed a ribbon in his hair. Mandy surveyed him with a mixed look of glee and disdain. "Oh, Shayla darling, I had no idea you would look so pretty. If only your father could see you now in your cute little skirt." "Hello, Mandy," said Shay in a subdued voice. "Shouldn't that be Mummy darling? It sounds so much more girly. I've just had a lovely chat to a couple of your classmates and they have told me all about you. Tell me, Shayla sweetie, are you wearing a nice petticoat under your pretty skirt? Do show me." Reluctantly, Shay raised his skirt to reveal a frilly white slip. "Oh, how precious," sneered Mandy, clapping her hands. "Well, who would have thought that you would become such a swishy little sissy?" "You pushed me into it," protested Shay. "I never for a moment thought you would go for it," snarled Mandy, who was beginning to lose her composure. "I was counting on you being some sort of a man and leaving school so I could put the money I waste on your expensive schooling to better use, like supplementing the pathetic allowance your father left me. But how was I to know you would turn out to be such a little Miss Sissy Panties?" She paused for a moment until an idea struck her. "Okay, sissy girl, here's the deal. Since you are so into being a girl, I'll pay for you to have that useless thing between your legs cut off and a proper cunt put in its place, but you will have to do something for me." "What?" asked Shay in a small voice. "You leave school and get a job in somewhere like Victoria's Secret, where you can drool all day over the undies. Then you pay me back for the cost of the surgery, and of course I will get the money I waste on keeping you here." "I don't know," said Shay hesitantly. "I'll give you a week to decide," snarled Mandy, "and now get out of my sight, sissy." Shay quickly left, having great trouble keeping a straight face. Once outside, he rejoined Kristen and Sam. "How did it go?" asked Kristen anxiously. "Couldn't have been better," said Shay with a big smile. "Right, let's call Aunt Catherine," said Kristen. Mandy left soon after without bothering to see Claire. On the whole, she was satisfied with her day's work and she hummed a little tune as she drove back to London. A week later, she received a summons to appear in family court at the Old Bailey. Family court. Mandy looked more angry than worried as she glared at Shay and Claire seated on the other side of the aisle that divided the small courtroom. She could not comprehend how this had happened, as she was sure that events would show that it was her word against Shay's and that her high-priced lawyer would come through for her. After all, didn't events usually work her way? The judge, a middle-aged motherly-looking woman, entered and proceedings got underway. After the usual preliminaries, Mandy was called to the stand and her lawyer took her through their carefully rehearsed narrative of how she had come home unexpectedly and found Shay gazing at himself in the mirror in her bedroom while wearing one of her best dresses. They emphasized the compassion Mandy had shown to her stepson, who was naturally devastated by the discovery. Mandy described how, despite the urgency of her trip to New York, she had arranged schooling for Shay in a safe and caring summer home while she was away. The performance was a quite brilliant example of a step-parent doing her best for her charge. Kristen's aunt, Catherine Watson, a distinguished-looking middle-aged woman, who was representing Shay, rose to cross-examine. "Mrs. Pegg," she began in a deceptively pleasant voice, "I note that you are a most elegant dresser." In spite of the occasion, Mandy blushed slightly at the compliment. Catherine Watson went on, "The dress you are wearing now, for example, do you often dress that way?" "Yes, I need to always present a smart appearance," answered Mandy. "You described to the court finding your stepson one of your best dresses, is that correct?" "Yes," answered Mandy, unsure of where this was leading. "I apologize for asking a personal question, but it is necessary," said Catherine Watson smoothly. "What is your dress size?" "I wear a size 10, said Mandy proudly. Catherine Watson appeared to consult some notes on the table in front of her. She looked up and said, "I have here a note from a sales assistant at a clothing store in Oxford that your stepson, or daughter as you now call her, was measured as a size 16. My question is how someone who wears a size 16 could possibly fit into a size 10 dress?" "Well, I expect she grew. Teenage boys, do you know," snapped Mandy. 3 dress sizes in 2 months, and someone taking hormone suppressors. Come now, that's not credible," said Catherine Watson. "I suggest to you, Mrs. Pegg, that your account is a figment of your vivid imagination." "That's not true," flashed Mandy. "We'll see," said Catherine, picking up another paper. I have here a copy of the will of the late Martin Pegg, which has a rather unusual clause, Clause 7 to be exact. It states that Shay Pegg's schooling will be paid by the estate until he completes university, but in the event that he elects to drop out of school, the monies would go straight into the account of Amanda Pegg. She paused for a moment and fixed Mandy with a steady gaze. Mrs. Pegg, I suggest to you that you dreamed up this scheme of forcing your stepson into a girls' school in the expectation that he would leave school and the education monies would come directly to you? That's a lie, cried Mandy. Catherine ignored this outburst and changed tack in her questioning. Mrs. Pegg, in your earlier submission you said that you found your stepson posing in front of the mirror, is that correct? Yes, said Mandy defiantly. I will call witnesses who will testify that you told them at a recent Parents' Day at Highcliffe that you found him masturbating in front of the mirror. Which is it, Mrs. Pegg? Well, he was posing and playing with himself, said Mandy savagely. What date was this? It was this Easter when he was home from school. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Catherine reached again into the pile on her desk and consulted a letter. This is a letter from the headmaster at Repton, Shay Pegg's previous school, which states that he spent the Easter break at the school and never left the school grounds. What have you to say to that, Mrs. Pegg? I must have got the date wrong, said Mandy desperately. Her lawyer gave an audible groan and looked at the ceiling. Mandy's story was rapidly unraveling, but there was worse to come. Catherine addresses the judge and said, Your Ladyship, I have a recording that will completely vindicate my client's claim that he was a victim of an attempted fraud by his stepmother. I request the court's permission to play this recording. The judge glanced at Mandy's lawyer and said, Any objection, Mr. Probert? Mr. Probert shook his head, sensing imminent defeat. Catherine said, On my advice, my client wore a recording device during a meeting with his stepmother at Parents' Day at Highcliffe on the 15th of this month. This is the conversation that took place. The court sat in stunned silence as they heard Mandy's admission of the plot to deprive Shay of his education and her grotesque offer to fund sex reassignment surgery. By the end, Mandy had collapsed and sat sobbing with her face in her hands. After a few minutes, the judge addressed Mandy and said, Mrs. Pegg, in my long history in the family court I have never encountered such a despicable plot by a guardian against their child. It is clear that you were motivated by a combination of greed and malice to deprive your stepson of his rightful education. You have certainly committed perjury here today, and I believe that you may shortly face a charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. I have the power to completely revoke your guardianship, which I hereby exercise. Mrs. Pegg, you are no longer the guardian of Shay Pegg, and the court forbids you from having any contact with him in the future. I will make recommendations that a new guardian be appointed for Shay Pegg. Do you have anything to say, Mrs. Pegg? Mandy, still sobbing, shook her head. Catherine attracted the judge's attention and said, Your Ladyship, my client has a request for who he would like to act as his guardian. Please see me in my chambers and I will consider your request. Court adjourned. As Shay and Claire were exchanging hugs, a man in a dark suit approached Mandy and said, Amanda Pegg, I am Detective Inspector Beale of the Fraud Squad. I am arresting you on a charge of conspiracy to commit fraud and require you to accompany me to the nearest police station to be formally charged. Mandy, now completely crushed, was led away. In the judge's chambers, Catherine presented her submission that Shay's new guardian be Claire. After a short deliberation, the judge agreed and signed and stamped the appropriate papers. Outside, Catherine announced the news to Claire, Shay, and Kristen. They could not contain their delight and were soon crying tears of joy and hugging each other. Back at school, the news of Shay's court appearance and the pending trial of his stepmother quickly spread at Highcliffe, and Shay was surprised at the support he received from his classmates. A week later, he was relaxing in his room after class when there was a tap at the door, and Kristen announced that Sam and the other girls from the boat wanted to see him in the common room. Mystified, he followed her down and she pushed him into the room. Surprise! Shouted 40 voices. Shay stared in surprise at his beaming classmates. What's going on? He asked. We wanted to give you a special going-away party and to tell you how much we have loved having you as a classmate and friend, said Heather, who had stepped forward. Going-away party? Asked Shay in a puzzled voice. Yes, said Kristen, coming up behind him and hugging him. We realized that now your stepmother is no longer your guardian. You will be going back to your old school, and we wanted to let you know how much we will miss you." Shay was lost for words for a few moments. Finally he said, "I can't thank you enough for doing this, girls. It's true I will be leaving Highcliffe, but not for at least 2 years, the same time as all of you are leaving." "What?" they gasped in surprise. "Look, Highcliffe is by far the best school I have ever attended, and you are the best friends I have ever had. I fully intend to remain as a Highcliffe girl as long as the school will have me," said an emotional Shay. His final words were drowned out by wild cheering from the whole group. "Let's turn this farewell party into one big celebration," yelled Kristen, and Shay suddenly found himself engulfed in hugs and kisses. 7 years later, much has happened in the last 7 years to our cast, so let's do an update. Mandy was put on trial for conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and child abuse. She was found guilty and served a 5-year term in a dismal prison. Shortly after her conviction, Mr. Prescott, the lawyer for Shay's father, contacted Shay to inform him of a clause in the will which stated that if Mandy did not fulfill her duties as guardian satisfactorily, she would lose her allowance. She now works in Victoria's Secret in Bradford and hates it. Sonia became a tenured professor of mathematics at Oxford during Shay's first year at Highcliffe. The faculty promotion committee was puzzled to receive an anonymous email with an attached photo of Sonia in a bathing suit shortly before their meeting. They agreed that she looked very attractive, but that this should not give her an advantage in promotion. Sam was the first to be married. She won a blue for Oxford in the boat race and married one of the crew of the men's 8. Sherry, Carrie, Kristen, and Shayla were bridesmaids. Shay returned to life as a boy, most of the time, after graduating from Highcliffe. He and Kristen attended Oxford, and Kristen studied law with the intention of helping represent the transgender community. Shay studied philosophy and English literature and secured a teaching position at Highcliffe, where his classes are very popular. Heather became a national record holder in Olympic-style weightlifting and is certain to represent her country at the next Olympics. She regularly returns to Highcliffe to train the girls. Now we are caught up and we join Kristen and Shay, who have just returned from their honeymoon. The wedding was a lavish affair with many guests from Highcliffe in attendance. Kristen wore a fabulous dress with a long train, and Shay looked extremely dashing in a morning suit. They honeymooned in the Caribbean at an exclusive resort and spent much of the time in each other's arms and in bed when they were not on the beach. Kristen drove their car, a stately 1960 Silver Cloud, into the driveway of Claire and Sonia's house at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in midsummer. Claire and Sonia rushed out to greet them and help them carry their luggage inside. "Your usual room, Shay," said Sonia. "Come down in a few minutes for drinks in the garden." They emerged onto the terrace 30 minutes later, hand in hand. Kristen was wearing a short skirt and t-shirt, and Shay was dressed in a floor-length pleated, floral summer dress, and his hair hung down below his shoulders. "Shayla, you're back," cried Sonia and Claire, rushing to embrace their former foster child. "I'll always be Shayla in your house," replied Shay. "It's one way of thanking you for everything you have done for me." After drinks and one of Sonia's famous dinners, they talked long into the night of old times. They met again the next morning for a late breakfast, and halfway through there was a knock at the door. Sonia went to answer it and returned a few seconds later. "Just someone trying to sell double glazing," she said. After breakfast, Kristen said, "Let's go for a bike ride, Shay. You go up and change, and I'll just help Claire and Sonia clear up the dishes." Shay entered the bedroom and was going towards the bathroom when the door burst open and 4 figures rushed out and tackled him onto the bed. Heather had no difficulty holding him down while Sam, Sherry, and Carrie swiftly began to strip him of his clothes. "Shayla Peg, how dare you dress as a boy on your wedding day," scolded Sam. "But I'm already married," protested Shay. "You lot should know, you were all there." "Well, today is your proper wedding," insisted Sam. "Every Highcliffe girl deserves to be a bride, and today is your big day." They proceeded to dress Shay in the most feminine lingerie before lashing him into a very sexy corset. Silk stockings were slid gently up his legs and attached to the garter straps. He was then sat on a stool and his makeup was applied and his hair styled. Shay was then hauled to his feet and Carrie arranged a frothy petticoat on the floor, and Shay was helped to step into it. It was slowly and seductively drawn up his legs, and once at his waist Sam wound the petticoat belt around the corset laces in a complicated fashion and tied them off tightly. "Looks like you will be in petticoats till Kristen decides to release you," she laughed. "Perhaps she won't," said Carrie, "and you will have to go back to Highcliffe in your petticoat." "It wouldn't be the first time," countered Shay. "Close your eyes, Shayla," commanded Sam. "You can't see your dress until you are wearing it." Shay kept his eyes firmly closed as the dress was carefully lowered over his head. He gasped as the skirt fell in a whispering rush over his petticoat. He felt nimble hands button up the back, and still with his eyes closed he was led over to a full-length mirror. "Okay, you can open," said Sam. Shay squealed in amazement at the sight that beheld him. He was wearing a classic-style white silk dress from Pernovia's. The full skirt cascaded to the floor and trailed a little behind him. The top was sleeveless with a high neck, and the back had intricate lace detail all the way down to the waist. "Walk around and admire yourself, Shayla," said Carrie. "We will do a quick change and then we'll escort you out to your waiting husband." Shay was still in shock as his friends quickly changed into beautiful bridesmaid dresses and applied their makeup. When they were ready, Carrie opened the door and called downstairs. "They are ready for us. Come along, Shayla, you are about to experience every girl's dream." Shay was preceded downstairs by Sherry and Heather, while Sam and Carrie came behind holding up the train of Shay's dress. The party made its way slowly out onto the terrace where Sonia, Claire, and Kristen waited. Kristen was dressed in an elegant tux, and Claire and Sonia were both in pretty cocktail dresses. As Shay glided over to stand beside Kristen, Claire stepped in front of them. "Ladies, we are here to witness the marriage of Kristen and Shayla. Kristen, do you take Shayla Pegg to be your wife and to love and cherish her?" "I do," replied Kristen firmly. "Shayla, do you promise to be Kristen's wife whenever she demands and dress according to her wishes?" "Yes, I do," said Shay with conviction. "Then I declare you wife and suggest you seal this marriage with a kiss." The newlyweds were happy to comply and did so at regular intervals throughout the day until Shay, still in his wedding dress, was helped into the rolls and Kristen drove them away for a second honeymoon somewhere on the Dorset coast. "I've been dying to get you back into petticoats," said Kristen as she stroked Shay's silk-clad leg. "The idea of having both a husband and a wife has been my dream ever since I met you." "Well, I suppose we need to give some thanks to my awful stepmother for accidentally making this possible," said Shay. "Thanks, Mandy, you bitch," they said in unison, and then laughed so hard that Kristen almost drove off the road. She straightened the wheel and they drove sedately on to their new life together.